Recording in progress.
Nathan, are we ready? Good answer. Okay. All right, it's 6:30. We will get started. Welcome, everyone. This is the City Council meeting for the City of Fairway, Kansas. It is Monday, March 14th, 2022, 6:30 p.m. I'd like to call this meeting to order. I have one announcement before we go to the Pledge of Allegiance. I continue to receive comments and concerns about individuals not being able to hear speakers, both from the dais and from the public comment section. So if you would please speak directly into your mic, lean into it. If you are wearing a mask, please remove that mask before you speak. Okay, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first thing on the agenda this evening is the swearing in of our newly elected governing body member, John Allen. There you are, John Allen Smith. John Allen was selected a month ago at our February meeting by a vote of the council and had gone through the interview process. Welcome, John Allen. We are now going to make it official, and you will be sworn in by our city clerk, Kim Young.
Hi, John Allen. If you'll repeat after me, I. Oh, and if you'll raise your hand. I'm sorry, it is an oath. Okay. I guess you couldn't see me raising mine on here. So, okay, state your name.
John Allen Smith.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will support the Constitution.
That I will support the Constitution.
Of the United States.
Of the United States.
And the Constitution.
And the Constitution.
Of the State of Kansas.
Of the State of Kansas.
And faithfully discharge.
And faithfully discharge.
The duties as City Councilman.
The duties as City Councilman.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, John Allen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. All right, moving on to the monthly reports of the standing committees. The fire chief is not here this evening, so we will let his report stand. And admin, Nathan?
Oh, Mayor, I was hoping, since that changes until late in the agenda, that we'd get to have a swan song for all the committees.
Well, Nathan and I talked about that, and we decided to handle it this way, David. But if you would like to speak, go right ahead.
I just did. That was enough. Thank you.
Mayor, I will let the report stand as submitted.
All right, are there any questions concerning admin? All right, we'll move on to police. Chief?
I'll let my report stand. However, I do want to mention that we are in the middle of a hiring process. We have two very strong candidates, and I am hoping that within the next week or two we'll extend an offer to one of the individuals in the process.
Outstanding. And we currently have one opening?
Yes.
Great. Any questions for the chief? All right, Public Works, Bill?
Mayor, I will also let my report stand as submitted. The only thing I would like to mention is I hope Mother Nature is done with us, because I am definitely done with her. The last storm we had last week was when you think you're in the clear and send everyone home, and then have to get everyone out of bed and back to work at 8 o'clock at night till 3 o'clock the next morning. It's never a fun time, but we got it done. Hopefully it's the last one, and staff did a tremendous job as always.
Please extend our thank you to your entire staff and also to you.
Will do.
We appreciate very much. It's nice every Thursday morning to get up and look out the window and see our streets. That's a very, this sounds strange, but it's very comforting. So thank you.
Something else I'd like to point out, and it's to a man. It doesn't matter where you rank in the organization. Sunday night, whenever we had a storm come through, we originally dispatched John and Chuck as closest members to go in, thinking it was just going to take some salting. After about 25 minutes on site, Chuck, who's been with the city for a long time, called us up and he said, we could probably get away with salting, but it wouldn't be to our standards. We need to come in and plow. So the rest of us came in and did what we had to do.
Outstanding. Thank you. Any questions for Bill? All right. Parks and Rec, Bryce?
Hi there. I will let mine stand as submitted, but I would just add that we had our first committee meeting for the new park, or the new restroom at the park, Peterson Park, and we're hoping to get that kicked off here pretty soon. The RFP is online and ready to roll, so bids are due April 1st. So hopefully we will hit that ground running, and then by the end of the fall, or hopefully by the end of October, we will have a new restroom at Peterson Park.
Great news. Okay, Bryce. Any questions for Parks and Rec? Nope. Okay. Finance, Nathan?
So we did meet on the 23rd at 7:30 a.m. A couple things were discussed. First, I would say that we had a very good year had a very good month for sales tax. Our sales tax continues to trend high. In fact, the last several months we have broken any previous record of sales tax collection by the city of Fairway, and that includes our shared taxes that we receive from the county. So that's good news, and we hope that that trend will continue. The second part of our discussion for the Finance Committee was on the committee structure, which we see the revised guidelines and mayor's appointments on the consent agenda. There was a consensus to combine Administration and Finance Committee meetings and move that to a committee of the whole. It will move to the last Wednesday of the month at 6:30 p.m. Previously, the Finance Committee met the last Wednesday at 7:30 a.m. So we will start, assuming that passage of the new guidelines, we will move to that by the end of this month for March 30th for the Finance and Administration Committee. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions concerning finance? All right. Thank you, Nathan. Monthly reports of the special committees. Nathan, I'm going to let you go ahead and take that one.
No report for the tree board.
Okay. Next on the agenda is the public comment for the consent agenda items. I would like to read those into the record before I open public comment. Consent agenda includes A, approve minutes of the previous regular city council meeting, B, approve claims and appropriation, ordinance number 1759, February 2022. Approve agreement with Johnson County for stormwater best management practices cost sharing program. D, approve revised committee guidelines. E, approve mayoral appointments. Before I open it to public comment, I wanted to just make one announcement concerning an appointment, and that's on Planning Commission. Rorik Falscraft, who is a resident of Ward 4, I am appointing to Planning Commission. He was in the group of individuals that I interviewed not too long ago, and he was still interested, so he will be replacing John Allen. on the Planning Commission. Rorik is a mechanical engineer at Burns and McDonnell. Wendy Bailey, our Planning Commission chair, does know Rorik and recommended him too, so I'm very pleased that he was still available and interested in serving. Okay, I'll open the floor for public comment concerning the consent agenda items. Anyone wish to speak? Nope. All right. These items are determined to be routine enough to be acted on in a single motion. However, this does not preclude discussion. If a council member requests, an item may be removed from the consent agenda for further consideration in separate motion. Does anyone wish to remove an item? Jenna.
I don't know that I wish to remove it, but I wanted to speak about item C, and just because we've talked about how there's so much in these packets, and I want to make sure folks see the reimbursement for rain barrels and native tree planting. So if we could take a second and talk about that. And then for item D, there's one word change that I wanted to make. It probably not substantive. Everywhere it says advice and consent of the council, except on the Planning Commission, it just says the consent of council. So if we wanted to add the advice and consent to be consistent, I'm good with that.
Okay, Nathan, will you make that change? Bill, would you please comment on
Here.
item C?
This one.
Sure,
and
what would
B.
you like to know? It's a program that we've been involved with for the last 3 or 4 years, a combined effort with Johnson County Stormwater and Bridging the Gap. They do the administrative accounting for us, and all we do is reimburse the residents and then apply for reimbursement from Johnson County Stormwater.
Jenna, is that?
Yeah, so just like letting folks know if they're listening that if you want to get a rain barrel or native tree or pollinator, there's the application to do so. The information's all in our packet, and we encourage people to do so.
So, also on the website? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they can look there.
Perfect, that's it.
I think almost everything's on our website.
Yeah.
So can you refer anyone to that?
Sounds good?
Okay?
Yes?
All right, anyone else want to remove? Okay, I'll entertain a motion. Tanya?
Thank you, Mayor. Tanya Keys, Ward 4. Mayor, I move we approve the consent agenda items A through E.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda items A through E. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Passes unanimously. Okay, moving on to new business. Item A is the public hearing concerning the TIF project plan. I am now opening that hearing. It is continued from our previous council meeting in February. At the same time, I would like to consider item B. We will handle those two items together for discussion in a similar fashion that we did last month. Item B is consider ordinance number 1760, an ordinance of the governing body of the city of Fairway, Kansas, making findings, adopting a redevelopment plan, project plan, pursuant to KSA 12-1770, and amendments thereto, and approving a redevelopment agreement. All right, I'd like to start with a presentation from staff and our professionals that we have been using throughout this entire process. We'll begin with Rich as our city attorney. Nathan will go next, then Kevin as our bond counsel, and Dave Arterberry, who was not able to be with us last time, is here tonight as our financial consultant. So, Rich, I'll turn it over to you.
Are you taking public comment on this first?
Oh, by all means. Do we want to do that first? Did we do that first last time? Okay. Oh, I beg your pardon. That's exactly right. Let's start with Bob and Austin. No, Rich?
Let's go ahead and run through what you described,
Okay.
starting with Rich, and then once we're done with our presentations, the council will have an opportunity to discuss, and then we'll open it up for public comment after.
We always take public comment on every item on the agenda. And I do it at the time that it's discussed, but public comment does not come first. Okay. Okay, Rich?
Thank you, Mayor. Rich Cook, City Attorney. I won't reiterate what I said last time, but I'll just kind of say it again briefly. You know, I've been working on incentive and development agreements like this for years now, my entire legal career, and this is without a doubt one of the strongest redevelopment agreements that's come across my desk during that time. And I've said to you before last time that, you know, a good redevelopment agreement will do three things. First, it's going to ensure that a quality project gets built and that it's fully realized. The second thing that it's going to do is it's going to protect the city's financial interests. And the third thing it's going to do is protect the city and the broader community's policy interests. Now, this redevelopment agreement does all three of those things. And I kind of went into more detail about that at the last meeting, but I'll just say them again here briefly. On the first point, that it ensures a quality project is developed and that it is fully realized. So this development agreement includes a development schedule, which is to be expected, but also included within that are provisions that make sure that the project remains what it's been described as to us, which is an active adult project. So we have language and in the agreement that makes sure it gets completed and gets completed as intended. The second point I mentioned was that it protects the city's financial interests. This project does that in spades. The deal protects the city's bottom line through additional administrative fees, the public safety fee, and other additional provisions that are included, especially in Article 7 of the agreement in particular, which contains a lot of the special provisions. The third thing that a good redevelopment contract will do is it will protect the city and the broader community's policy interests. And again, when the city has a public incentive policy, this agreement touches on every point within that public incentive policy in one way or another. We address sustainability, diversity, community partnership. Everything that's listed in that in the public incentive public policy is addressed in this development agreement in some way or another. Again, as I've said many, many times through this process, this is always a give and take. No development agreement is perfect. We did not get everything we wanted. We asked for a lot. The developer asked for a lot. This is a compromise position, but it is a win-win agreement on the whole, in my opinion, and it protects the city's interest and the broader community's interest, and better than most development agreements that I've ever, probably better than any development agreement I've ever worked on.
All right. Thank you, Rich.
And I'm happy to take any questions anyone has, but regarding the agreements or anything else.
I think we'll hear a full staff report first, and then we'll take the questions. All right, Nathan.
All right. I'm going to just run through the same two documents I did last time, and that has to do with some of the numbers that Rich was just talking about. And I realize this is still really small on the screen, so I will blow it up a bit here. But these top two lines here talk about pure property tax revenues for all of the taxing jurisdictions that would be affected by this project. And you can see there are two lines here, a 20-year total with no project and a 20-year total with the project, including the TIF. So as I move along here, you can see the impact of the TIF revenue, or the property tax revenues. Again, this is with the TIF in place. The jurisdictions all do stand to gain in some form over the life of the TIF. And of course, the school district has a number of mills that are exempt from being collected through the TIF fund. So the school district does see a bigger return or bigger income over the 20 years, and that, again, that is with the TIF in place. So I just want to point that out again. That assumes a 2% annual growth. If we look here next, you can see these additional fees. These are fees that are paid directly to the City of Fairway, to the Shawnee Indian Mission Foundation, and to the Consolidated Fire District Number 2. You've got the year number here, and then the payments to the individual jurisdictions. And I just want to make clear, the way the TIF works is that the developer has to submit actual receipts for expenses incurred, and that is the money that gets reimbursed from the TIF fund. That is completely aside from the fees that are here on the screen now. They're not connected. So the developer can be reimbursed for actual costs that they incur for those eligible expenses. In addition to that, they're paying these fees directly back to the entity listed here. So you can see here all of these fees, what they total for each of the jurisdictions. On an aside here as well, then, there is an administrative fee in this final column to the right that talks about the administrative fee, which statutorily is allowed under a TIF district. And so that money will come from the TIF fund to the city. We'll basically kind of take that off the top as our expenses before we do the reimbursement annually to the developer. But that's a $5,000 fee that we'll collect over the per year over the 20 years. If we look here then at the summary just for Fairway, and I'll try and get this as big as we can here, you'll see that the total over the 20-year period with no TIF would result in income, assuming the project or the site stayed the same as it is today, it would be about $430,000, almost $431,000 in taxes. With the TIF, we'll see that slight bump in property taxes as well as the fees, which results in $3.3 million. And then that $3.3 million right below there is broken down so you can see where that number comes from. Are there any questions on this document here? Jenna?
Yeah, so I think I made this point last time, but just for clarity, this is super helpful. It doesn't show if the project went forth without a TIF or if there was another type of project.
Correct. This is specific to this project.
Okay, thank you.
Nathan, leave that up just a second.
Hold on, I got to find it again.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, this part, right? Yeah, right here. These numbers are critical to understanding what has been negotiated that benefits the city in this TIF. When we were first contacted with this project, and I'll probably repeat myself here in a little bit, I was very negative about TIFs. But I kept an open mind because I was not totally educated, and I learned that very quickly. And I have continued to learn over this process, and we started this process end of last April. And this number very clearly shows that the city is made whole and then some. And this is what Rich was referring to earlier, that the city financially is protected here in all caps. You all know I'm a numbers person, and Dave is going to speak to this here in a few minutes too. These numbers are very important to the city. Okay, thank you, Nathan.
Yeah, one thing too, and sorry to have the mask on, I'm getting over a cold. Not COVID, I did my test. We can't show it as a direct benefit to the city, but in my mind, the $100,000 contribution to the Shawnee Indian Mission Foundation does benefit the city because the city each year supports the mission to the extent that the foundation cannot. And by getting another $5,000 a year to the foundation, that's the net, unless the foundation falls short in its funding or decreases, that should reduce the city's contribution by $5,000 each year, which I view as an additional, we can't count it as a direct benefit, but an additional benefit to the city because it should indirectly reduce our outlay to support the mission. And I'm not expecting them to give any more than the $5,000 a year, even though it says it's a minimum. If they were to give more than $5,000 a year, that would be a bonus in my mind, but they're not obligated to. So I'm not counting any additional above the $5,000. And it's not indexed with either with inflation. So it's just a flat $5,000. But still, that's another $100,000 over the life of the TIF that will indirectly help the city.
Thank you, David. Very valid point. Tanya?
Tanya Keys, Ward 4. Thanks for pulling up this sheet again. I really appreciate it. I think I mentioned last month that one of the most appealing pieces to me is Section 7, which really, although in a narrative form, really illustrates the table that you have up with these additional pieces. I received a couple of questions from residents, and I just want to make sure for you to clarify. So on this table, it shows a 20-year total. The question I've received quite a bit is, well, but do we wait for 20 years to realize that, or do we see some of this incrementally annually?
Yeah, it is an annual. So they'll make annual payments. Each of these, so on year one, each of those payments will be made on the effective date of the agreement, and I think it's January of 2024. So that on essentially the day after the agreement kicks in, we'll get the first year's payment. A year later, we'll get the second year's payment. So it is going to be an annual installments.
Thanks so much.
All right,
Okay.
Nathan.
The next document is not nearly as complex. It just shows here basically the net estimated benefit to each jurisdiction. And then again, this is over the life of the TIF. So obviously Fairway's number is pretty inflated there because of the fees that we have on the on that first page that we went over. But this is with the TIF in place, because of the increase in value, assessed value that is anticipated, each of the jurisdictions will collect this much beyond what is currently the condition of the site.
And that's very key also, beyond, without the TIF. With the TIF,
Correct.
they will collect this amount above what they would collect without the TIF.
Correct.
May I clarify something, Nathan?
Yes, go ahead, Jenna.
Okay. If a project went forth without a TIF, however, there would be more collected by all of these jurisdictions.
I'd say potentially yes, but it also depends on the cost or the assessed value of the project. So this is based on a project that has, and I don't remember the appraised value or the anticipated appraised value of the site, but it's above $60 million. So if someone were to come in and build a project, say, of $4 million, the effect of that tax rate would be significantly less that all the jurisdictions would collect in property tax over the life of the TIF because the value of the property would be significantly less. So, it depends is the answer. It could, but again, if it's a small project in nature that wouldn't have the overall economic impact, then it may not.
Okay, thank you.
And Jenna, that's where that first form comes into play, the top two lines. We do collect a little bit more. Nathan, go back to that form. I think it's worth it. We collect $494,000 compared to $431,000. So we collect a little bit more. But the beauty of this development agreement are the additional fees and benefits that have been negotiated to pay.
Yeah.
Okay.
My only point was like putting it in like context, giving us the full context of the numbers that we're looking at. The numbers look fantastic, but it's kind of what were the opportunity costs, or what were the other options that we had or have on the table. That's what I'm trying to understand.
Such as what other opportunities? And
So if we didn't move forward with the TIF, would this developer come along with it, or would a different project come along, and how that would affect the value of the property?
which that's a crystal ball.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, we have no way of knowing that. And I think that's one of the conversations we initially had about how do you know? You don't. That's why you do your due diligence on the project that's been presented to you. which we have done.
Mayor, on your, is the developer going to have a time to comment
Yes.
also?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Nathan, is there anything else? All right, Kevin, please state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Kevin Wimpy with Gilmore and Bell, the city's bond counsel, 4618 West 62nd Terrace in the city of Fairway. So I'll go over the procedural items now, just a quick reiteration of last meeting, both talking about the TIF process, which has been the focus of the discussion, but also in the development agreement for consideration tonight is industrial revenue bond financing for sales tax exemption on the construction materials for this project. So I'll wrap up with that. But first, to go over the particulars on.
Do you mind, could we just have that as a totally separate conversation? Item C?
I'm happy to approach it however you like, yeah.
I mean, Mayor, it's up to you, but I've got some specific questions to that I think are just going to convolute A and B.
I'm fine with that. Kevin, can we postpone your?
I'll stick to TIF now.
Okay.
And call me back up when we're ready for the IRB discussion.
We won't forget you.
Sure thing. So focusing on TIF, so recall the brief history again. At the back end of 2021, the City Council created the TIF district, which froze the assessed value at the site and established the geographic area for the TIF district. And now we've repeated essentially the same process to do the public notice, to call the public hearing that was open last month and continue to tonight's meeting. And upon conclusion of that public hearing, you can move forward with considering an ordinance that approves the TIF project plan and also the development agreement under the same ordinance. Upon the effective date of that TIF project plan, the 20-year TIF clock would begin, and again, that commences on January of 2024 per the developer's request. And then that will start again the 20-year TIF clock, during which that increment can be spent to reimburse eligible TIF costs. That's all I had for prepared remarks, but happy to stick around and answer any questions.
Any questions for Kevin? Not at this time.
Last thing I'll add, I think I skipped over, is the ordinance does require a 2/3 vote, so it's a supermajority vote at this stage.
Okay. All right, Dave Arterberry. Dave, unfortunately, wasn't able to be with us a month ago, so he's going to give us his presentation this evening. And one thing I wanted to mention before he identifies himself and begins, we had an open item in our minutes from the last meeting, Councilwoman Brofsky's question concerning whether the project had a reasonable rate of return, and that will be a part of Dave's presentation this evening. Okay?
Thank you, Mayor. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. And I'll keep my remarks brief and, of course, be available for questions afterwards. But I just
Please identify yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
David
good.
Arterberry with Stiefel Nicholas and Company. Our address is 4801 Main Street, Kansas City, Missouri. I just wanted to make a few comments about TIFs in general, and then I can talk a little bit about the rate of return also. I think some of these comments, they might ring a bell because I think I talked about these back in November, December of last year. First of all, as a real brief background on TIF projects, TIF financing was developed, I think, back in the 1950s or 60s in California for the express purpose of providing incentives to help redevelop blighted property that in some way is being hindered from being redeveloped, primarily because there's old, dangerous, or obsolete structures on it. And in my opinion, this property probably pretty well nails that original intent of TIF financing. The other thing I wanted to mention about TIFs is a lot of the TIFs that we see occurring these days, a lot of them have one common feature in them. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And that is that they have a parking structure. They're just not involved. It's just not a piece of property with surface parking. It's a piece of property that needs to have a parking garage on it in order to accommodate the density of development. So again, this piece of property, based on the proposed development, also sort of meets that general criteria or that general feature. I was just kind of curious before I came out here today. I got on the county's website and looked to see just in this area, sort of in the northeast part of the county, kind of bound by I-35, 69, 435, how many current TIF districts are there? And I counted up 18 of them, most all of which involve the redevelopment of blighted property into either multifamily or commercial development. So this isn't something that it is all unique to being what is asked to the city of Fairway. In terms of the rate of return, I went and I did some research, and I looked online and tried to establish what would be considered an acceptable rate of return for investors in multifamily developments. And pretty much all of the conclusions that I saw were that a rate of return in the mid-teens, 13 to 18%, is what most investors are looking for. I believe the development agreement mentions a 15% rate of return. To me, that seems very reasonable. In fact, I think there might be a lot of investors who would actually look for a little higher rate of return than that. So to me, that seems like a very reasonable rate for this kind of project based on the research that I did. So.
All right. What's your opinion, Dave, about the numbers that were presented to us? I know you sat down with Joe as our finance chair and spent a considerable amount of time, and also with the developer.
Yeah.
Can you share your thoughts?
Joe and Nathan and I had several meetings where we reviewed the projections that the developer provided, and Joe actually prepared some of his own, and I prepared some of my own, and that we sat down with the developer and actually sort of resolved some differences between our projections and their projections. And obviously there's a lot of assumptions that go into these, but I think once we understood the assumptions that were made, we felt comfortable that their numbers represented a realistic view of their return. You know, the wild card on all of this is when they go to sell the property, you don't know how much that property is going to be worth, but it seemed like to us all the assumptions leading up to that all seemed very reasonable.
Okay. Any questions for Dave? Joe?
Dave, when you express a rate of return, are you using the internal rate of return or return on equity?
I was using an internal rate of return.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Can I ask,
Jenna, go ahead.
can you turn that rate of return into an actual number? Like, what are we talking about? What is 15% equivalent to approximately?
In terms of a dollar amount?
In terms of a
per
dollar
year?
amount, yeah.
I'd have to dig through my projections, but it seemed like once the project was fully leased up and running, it was somewhere around $1 million a year in net income.
Okay, thank you.
And that's a return on a total value of the project of 46 million? Or
Yeah, I think it was closer to 60.
Is it 60
something.
million?
Yeah.
60 million? Okay, I stand corrected.
David Watkins, Ward 3. Dave, thank you for your assisting us with the financial side of it, because it's not easy to work through the numbers. One thing, you've been able to have a lot of discussions with us that were in a more closed environment because of attorney-client, because we're still negotiating with the developer. So I think it's important for our residents to hear some of the comments that you made in the public forum and on the public record, one of which, as I recall, you said that based on your analysis of this TIF and this project and others, that this project would not be able to go forward without a TIF component, that they would not be able to attract investors. Am I recalling that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, the projections that we were looking at, which again, I felt after we went through them, they seemed reasonable. It looked like without the incentive, the rate of return would have been somewhere in the low 6%. And you know, I don't know, I don't invest myself in multifamily property, but based on the rate of return that investors expected, you know, that mid-teen return seems to me like a 6% rate of return wouldn't make it viable. I can't speak for the developers on whether or not they would proceed with the project without this kind of incentive, but I think I know what their answer would be.
And I think, as if I'm recalling, another comment that you made was that from your perspective, you you felt that no matter what the project was, it would probably require some financial assistance from the city to move forward.
Yeah, based on the size of that piece of property, and if you want it to be sort of a high-density use, multifamily, an office building, something like that, to me, it seems like it's going to require some sort of investment based on what's on that property right now and what it would cost to wipe it clean.
And if I'm understanding our internal rate of return cap, the 15%, that really is, I think I'm characterizing it correctly as a cap, because if their actual results exceed 15%, as our agreement is written, and Rich, you could correct me if I'm wrong here too, the TIF is reduced so that their actual return is truly capped at 15%. So if it turns out that their projections were low, I guess, on the profitability, and they're making more money than their projections are showing, that then would reduce the TIF.
That's my understanding.
Okay, is that correct? And maybe that was a better question to address
That's
more
correct.
for you.
Nope. You summed it up perfectly.
Okay, because I just want to make sure I'm understanding I know the 15%, but it's a cap, really, is what it is.
Right.
Okay.
That's my understanding, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dave?
I'll just clarify.
Okay, Jenna?
Dave, just trying to understand context. Jenna, would you move closer to the mic? Absolutely. Can you hear me now? Trying to understand kind of context. Your role for the city was kind of, well, can you just tell me your role for the city?
I'm serving as an advisor to the city to help them financially analyze the viability of the project. Historically, I've worked with the city on their bond issues, helping them to issue the bonds for different debt-related projects. This project, I guess it involves the IRBs, but the analysis that I've been working with on this project has not involved the bonds. It's just involved the cash flow from the project and looking at other TIFs and that kind of thing.
Okay. Is it fair to say that, like, whether there could be another project that didn't require a TIF is outside the scope of that role?
Yeah. I don't have any idea of what other sort of project might be viable for that site. Yeah, that's something out of my purview.
Got it. Thank you.
Dave has worked with the city now 15, 20 years.
Yeah, probably 20.
So he's very, very familiar with our financing. He's familiar with our financials and how we approach things in Fairway. I have a lot of confidence in Dave and the work that he's done for us.
And I do too. I'm just trying to understand the scope of his expertise, what we're relying on him for versus otherwise.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
All right, now we'd like to hear from the developer. If you'll both please identify yourself.
Good evening, Austin Bradley with EPC Real Estate Group, 8001 Metcalf Avenue, Overland Park, Kansas, 66204. I just want to say thank you all. This has been a long and extensive process. Last April, I think, Mayor, you just mentioned. Kudos to all of you, your entire staff. We work in a lot of municipalities, and it's really been a constructive and effective and healthy process. Shout out to Rich and Nathan. I know you all put a lot of time and effort into it, all of you, but especially you guys. So thank you all. I just want to push pause here for a minute, let you know what we've been doing, kind of give you a quick update over the last 60 to 90 days. We've obviously gotten through a series of approvals here, so we've kind of gotten the confidence to really make some commitments to our team and make some headway here. About 60, 90 days ago, we engaged a specific active adult consultant, Graystar, out of Dallas. They've been doing this for the last 10 years, have a lot of experience in this. And so we wanted to bring in a third party to analyze this project, this specific location, and bring them on the team and help us move forward. So first, we did an extensive comprehensive market study. You've seen some of our slides in the past that spoke to demographics, but we also wanted to do psychographics, understand tapestry segments within a mile, 3 miles, 10 miles. We know there's a lot of folks in the 55 to 84 range. We want to know who these people are, so we can be identifying specific unit mix, layouts, and some of those kind of things specific to that. So results of that were very promising. It substantiated what we saw on the site early on in the process, so that was really encouraging. We were happy to see that, and I'm happy to share as much of that detail as you like. It's extensive, and it's really helpful, but just wanted to kind of mention that here at the outset. We've also been working on programming, unit design, unit layout, unit mix with them. Again, we're trying to leverage their lessons learned over the last 10 years, so we can kind of be starting fresh. Some of those kind of things, just a couple quick examples. This demographic wants their own laundry room. We're market rate housing. You may have a stackable laundry, kind of tucked back into your closet. You want a laundry room here. You want spaces for dining tables. You want large patios. You need extensive linen cabinet space. So a couple of very high-level examples of what we've been doing, but we're really taking that information and dialing it into the unit mix and our unit layouts, been making modifications to really just fine-tune this thing. And so that's kind of all led us to where we are today. Wrapping up final plan deliverables, which we hope to have to you guys very soon. And if we're fortunate to move forward this evening, it'll put us, we're prepared to go full speed tomorrow. Literally, I had a call this afternoon, kind of putting our design team on deck, go full speed ahead, which will put us on track for a Q3 demolition and then commencing construction by the end of the year. So I want to be brief here. I wanted to mention that, let you know what we've been doing on behalf of our entire team. We're extremely excited to be bringing this project to Fairway. Frankly, the market needs it. And we know it's going to be a huge success. So I'm going to turn it over to Bob, but once he's wrapped up, be happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Thank you, Austin.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Bob Johnson, Polsinelli Law Firm, 5332 Falmouth Road, Fairway, Kansas. Won't belabor anything here. Austin actually took most of my points, which is great. He and I talk every day, several times a day, so I'm not surprised. I just do want to say a thank you to the council, to the mayor, to your professional consultants, and to Nathan as well. Highly, highly professional process, highly, highly constructive process. I said that last time, I'll just say it again. This was a true public-private partnership. It doesn't always go that way. I think this council and this staff and your consultants deserve some credit from this side of the fence, if you will, to recognize that the constructive nature of the process, I think, created a well-balanced agreement. It took a long time because we were working very diligently through a very complex and methodical process, but that produced, at the end of the day, what I, from my vantage point, working on a lot of these deals, view as a very thorough, very well-balanced deal that is going to succeed for all the reasons Austin just mentioned, and because you've got the right partner here in a private partner that will convey the project that I believe this community deserves. And I speak also as a private citizen of this community to say that I'm excited. I think this is long overdue to the city of Fairway to have this type of housing diversity and the options for people in this community who want to age in place and stay in this community. I think it's going to be a benefit to us all. And I appreciate the opportunity as a citizen of Fairway to be involved in the process. And so, like Austin said, we ask for your support, and we'll be off to the races. We have been already. The accelerator goes down completely to the floor in the morning if we have your support tonight. So we'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Bob. Council, any questions for Austin or Bob? Not at this time. No, David, go ahead.
I do have a very specific question because the ordinance will either be approved or not approved. If approved, I assume you're going forward with the project as proposed.
Yes, sir.
If the ordinance is not approved, will you go through with the project?
No.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you both. Okay, I'd like to turn it over to the council for a discussion. If you have any additional before we open it for public comment. We will also ask for a discussion after the public comment. If you prefer to wait till then, that's entirely fine. Any now? All right, I will open the floor. Oh, hi, John Allen. I haven't been able to see your face, and all of a sudden it's in front of me.
I'm good.
I'm
good.
assuming you haven't raised your hand because Nathan hasn't been over there flagging me down. Okay.
No, I'll chime in.
I would
I'm
like
looking
to
forward to it.
open the floor to any public comment concerning the project and the ordinance that is currently in front of us.
Mayor, I'll just add, if there's anybody who's watching via the Zoom application and you wish to make a public comment, you can use the raise hand feature at this time.
Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, please.
Thank you. My name is Julie Peterson, and I live at 4831 Belinda Court, right next door in Westwood, Kansas. Thank you, Mayor, City Council, and staff for taking my comment. As I said, I'm Julie Peterson, and I'm the director of the U.S. Green Building Council's Central Plains chapter, which covers Kansas and half of Missouri. At USGBC, we're committed to transforming how our buildings are designed, built, and operated in order to enable an environmentally and socially responsible, healthy, and prosperous environment, improving the quality of life. We do all of this through LEED, the world's most widely used and robust green building system with more than 100,000 buildings participating today. And our members include thousands of architects, engineers, contractors, materials suppliers, and more, including many right here in the greater Casey metro area. LEED certified buildings are proven to save money, improve efficiency, lower carbon emissions, and create healthier places for people. They are a critical part of addressing the climate crisis, meeting ESG goals, enhancing resilience, and supporting more equitable communities. I applaud all of you for leaning in to help ensure that our built environment becomes more sustainable, especially considering that in the greater Casey area, almost 60% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from buildings. And as a public body, I want you to know that the LEED rating system produces better outcomes than other rating systems by providing more measurable data and tangible benefits for the city, the building, the owner, and the occupants. While we don't always know what we are getting with some other rating systems, with LEED, the outcomes are clear. The rating system I understand that's proposed for this project does not provide any specific data on environmental or economic benefits of their certification. But the performance of LEED certified buildings is tracked and reported, and we have data to show the reduced water and energy consumption, reduced CO2 emissions, and increased levels of occupant health and satisfaction. And I've got lots of great examples and a couple of success stories to share right here in the metro area if you're interested. So I'm encouraging the City Council to revise the language in the development agreement to reflect a LEED certification requirement. This would be included on page 19 under Article 7, Special Provision 7.6 Sustainability Standards, as well as within the Annex of Definitions under Sustainability Certification. And additionally, USGBC is available to meet with Fairway staff or City Council to discuss this further, and we can answer any questions you have. Our advocacy and policy team would be happy to help you craft criteria to guide TIF requests and other incentives with the goal of creating a standardized incentive policy that you could point to each time you're approached with these requests. Thank you for taking the time to hear my comments.
Thank you, Julie. Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Kathy Gates. I live at 5406 Mission Road in Fairway. I've lived here for 43 years, and I love the city of Fairway, and I love the fact that you're exploring this opportunity for our residents and being creative about the ways you would approach it, because I do think it will be an asset for our community. So I am also the
Kathy,
chair.
can you get a smidge closer to your microphone for me?
Yeah, like that.
Thank you.
Okay, I can talk loud too, but you probably don't want me to. Anyway, I am chair of the Shawnee Indian Mission Foundation, and I'm very appreciative of your mentioning that in the agreement with the developer. I think that also in a built-up community like ours is an enormous asset, not only as a National Historic Landmark, but because of all the space it provides our residents. So many touch points for appreciating the mission, including the land. Anyway, I thank you, Mayor, City Council, and staff for taking my public comment today. And I wanted to take just a moment to call your attention to the definition of sustainability certification, which currently falls short of the standard I believe Fairway intended to set. I thank you for ensuring that the project is a good fit for the Fairway community and by requiring a sustainability certification in exchange for the TIF and EDRBs. However, not all green certification is the same. On our own sustainability webpage, under new construction in Fairway, we state consider LEED certified. Well, one of the creators of LEED certification is a Kansas Cityan, Bob Berkebile, and he also is one of the people who helped found the U.S. Green Building Council, which is a huge asset to our community, and I would encourage you to take advantage of all the wonderful things Julie Peterson mentioned as resources. Free, why not? Anyway, as the City of Trees, I ask the City Council to affirm our commitment to green sustainable development by revising the language to reflect LEED certification requirement rather than green globes, or at least strike specifying a rating system at this time and ask the staff, you need a lot of more work, I know, to define acceptable certifications based on the city's desire minimum standards for leadership in efficiency, energy efficiency, indoor environmental quality, climate mitigation practices, and waste reduction. I think that we could really distinguish ourselves as a community by insisting on LEED certification. I might add that Westwood View Elementary, a school that many of our neighbors attend, is going for LEED Gold certification. They may only reach silver, but they are going for LEED certification. In the end, it's my understanding that there is some work involved, but because of all the all the metrics that we can tout and actually feel good about, it's not just about window dressing. It's about really knowing that we are doing the right thing for our community and where we live. So those are my remarks, and I encourage you to consider LEED. And thank you very much for taking my comments tonight.
Thank you, Kathy. Anyone else? Please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, my name's Joe Alberti. I live at 5905 Fontana, Ward 4. And here are my comments. I'm concerned about the building of a large active adult apartments project off of Shawnee Mission Parkway as it has been presented in city newsletters and email updates, mostly due to the sudden population density it would create in that area, but also because of the many yet unanswered questions about how it would be managed, for instance, and how it would compare to other senior assisted living facilities that may exist, do exist. Because we're in a pandemic, I believe the time necessary to collect all public comments that are out there has been compressed due to the amount of other urgent news and restrictions people have been living with for the past few months since this proposal was first made. With 225 units of 5-story buildings, it would drastically change the character and use of that area. And population density, from my experience going to other cities, is something not to be taken lightly because of how much it impacts daily life with increased traffic and other activity. Light pollution and noise levels go up, and traffic slowdowns occur throughout the day, not just during rush hour. And while some may say increased population only has economic benefits, at some point, too much unplanned density starts to cause problems, and this may be just the start of a lot more similar large projects, if approved. while Fairway may benefit from having a good quality and affordable retirement community option in its mix of housing options, I think this one could be done without TIF. It's not in a depressed area by any means, and it's also fair to ask, I think, if more TIF applications might start to stream in, which would need evaluation by the City Council and more public comment like this. So in my opinion, when a property owner comes to the city, like this one did, and asks for TIF, it should get even more extra careful scrutiny, which may be done, may be getting done. But did Fairway know it needed a major active adult living facility before this happened? Why did these developers, while these developers may dot all their I's and cross all their T's, I'm sorry, but the true motive could well be simply, not necessarily from this in this case, but in future cases, simply to take advantage of TIF, using it to build oversized projects for the community they are built in, and maximizing profits for outside investors. Many significant and valid contributions are included in this proposal, including payments to civic organizations, as well as to abide by Fair Housing Act laws. But again, are these the right benefits at the right time for Fairway that it has been wanting, or did these get decided in a fast-tracked way? So I respectfully ask that the board, the council and mayor vote, not the mayor, but the council vote no on this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Anyone else? Nathan, is there anyone on Zoom? Going once? Anyone else? Twice? All right. I will accept a motion to close the public hearing section of the meeting.
You can just close it, Mayor.
I can just close it? All right, it is closed. All right, we'll move on to ordinance number 1760. I won't read it again, but I will open the floor to discussion. Any questions that the council has, discussion among themselves? Any questions to our professionals or staff? Any comments you wish to make?
I might be a little confused. We're talking about items A and B at the same time, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So Nathan, I thought I saw an email from you that you had some comments you were going to pass along to us.
No, in fact, I just had some inquiries from exchange emails with Joe earlier today, but our previous speaker. But otherwise, I've not received any feedback from any of the emails that we've sent out.
Okay, sounds good. So if it's all right to ask the experts and okay,
by all means.
Could the developers, for the record, I guess, explain what Project Green Globes 2 Globes certification is? Also, so I don't have a series of questions at the end, maybe why you didn't choose lead for this?
Yeah, sure. So Sarah Greenwood with Greenwood Consulting is part of the project team. And so, about 6 months ago, we engaged her and gave a full-on project review and said, hey, here's the project, here's the exact location, here's what we're doing, the active adult, the units. And so she took all of that. She's, I think, a widely known and respected expert in that field. And so we took her recommendation to achieve the sustainability goals that the city sets forth within the policy to recommend the Green Globe certification. Again, that's specific to that project type in residential. That's not to dismiss LEED, but that's her recommendation. She's been at previous hearings, and there was no questions, and so I didn't ask her to come here, but she would probably be the best person to address some of that. But there's been a lot of thought and effort put into that recommendation specifically, and that's coming from her as the expert on the team.
And Austin, if I remember correctly, this subject has been specifically discussed since probably May or June.
I think that's right,
Yeah. Okay. Anything else, Dan? I can tell you're thinking.
Yeah, it's easy to tell when I'm thinking. I agree with you. We have discussed this previously, and while I don't remember the exact details of those discussions right now, I mean, we got to a point where I believe everybody was comfortable that this was an acceptable alternative. It's not LEED. I mean, LEED has different levels from the way I understand it.
Correct.
This isn't a government or municipal project like a school. So I couldn't tell you one way or the other why LEED's not being used here, but we've had that discussion before.
Yes, we have.
May I speak on that?
Yes, Jenna.
So just to be clear, we did propose LEED in our, and then kind of through the negotiations, it was agreed upon that Green Globes was kind of a compromise. It wasn't our original proposal. I know that I proposed it.
Well, it was in our discussion, yes.
So was that not conveyed to the, I think it was conveyed to the.
Yeah, it was. It was conveyed early on, and we had multiple discussions about it with the developer, and this is where we ended up.
Okay, and then Ms. Greenwood, was she hired like in response to the things, like the priorities that we wanted as a city?
Absolutely. I think this is the first meeting that we came. We said, hey, we're going to bring her on the team from the outset, from the get-go, understanding that's a priority for the city. And so our directive to her was saying, hey, you know, we want it to be your recommendation based on this being residential, not a government building, Councilman, like you mentioned. So that was coming from her, you know, as an expert in the field. But she was brought on early, you know, almost a year ago.
Yes. I do remember that. I also remember talking about the kind of some of the pushback, I believe, was that LEED was too expensive. So can you speak to that?
Sure. I don't think it's as much of an expense. You know, the residential component and, you know, potentially some of the commissioning related to each individual residential unit makes it more challenging, for lack of a better word, versus a government building or a school or something like that. And so, again, when Sarah Greenwood kind of took our program and our specific product type, understanding it's residential, and we said, hey, you know, we're trying to achieve the policies of the city and the sustainability. There's a handful of tools and kits out there, you know, to address that, some more robust than others, but it was her recommendation that the Green Globe would be a great fit for that. And so she would be the best person to speak to it in specificity and detail, you know, but that was the guidance we gave her, and that's her recommendation she came back with.
Thank you.
Sure.
And Jen, if I remember correctly, in our initial conversations about this subject, that was tossed about that LEED was very expensive, but I don't think that came to fruition, that it was actually factual.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at, is I didn't think that it was actually a cost barrier. So I was sure that wasn't the reason relied upon.
Yeah, the recommendation, just to reemphasize, is tailored to this site and this product type. It's not a blanket, hey, certification, go for LEED. It's tailored specifically to what we're proposing at that location.
Bob, are you going to add anything to this subject? No. Okay, because I want to ask Austin a question before he goes away.
Sure.
But go ahead.
I was just going to add to what Austin mentioned, based upon my experience in other projects, in particular the Brook Ridge project that has agreed to I guess I'd call it a hybrid of LEED and Green Globes, and that was a very extensively, given the scope of that project, analyzed system and the way that was balanced, and it was determined in that case. And that project has been held up nationally as really a standard bearer for the intent to do sustainability in different types of development uses. And in that case, it was determined, similar to this case and to what Councilman Bailey was speaking to, is that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's not LEED is better than Green Globes or Green Globes is better than LEED. They're both highly respected sustainability certifications. It is what is best for the project, what fits the project. In that case, for the residential component, Green Globes, 2 globes in that case, which is the standard. There is a stratified layer of different levels of globes, similar to like LEED, gold, silver, platinum, etc. Green Globes, 2 globes for the residential in Brook Ridge is what that project will accomplish, and LEED for their office buildings was the standards they were going to accomplish there, so that the best system was used for the appropriate type of development. So just essentially kind of bolstering in another case what Austin is speaking to here, that it's been studied, and for this particular case, and again, Sarah would be the expert, but it has been analyzed for many months and determined that green globes will best fit the residential component of the project here. We are at a point of making a decision tonight. We'd ask that we move forward on the system and the agreement that we've made over these last several months so that we can move forward with the project. Thanks.
Go ahead, Dan.
I'm thinking of how to ask this. Would you, as a developer, and Sarah, I guess you're speaking for her now, if this was to pass tonight as is, the language is, or a similar alternative program reasonably approved by the city, would you be open to have the conversation with somebody about their, their thoughts as to where this is lacking, and enter into a good faith discussion about that?
Of course, absolutely. I'll be clear, though. Our intent would be to do the Green Globe system, but we will, in good faith, absolutely have those conversations. I'll also say the project is deep into final development plan design based upon the Green Globe system, and that's, as Austin mentioned, close to submittal to the city based upon Green Globe. So we're at the 1 yard line on Green Globe certification, so that a shift there would be time and cost based, on the premise that we've been moving forward on what we've agreed to. That said, and you'll see that, the final development plan will be here and it'll include all those components, and certainly we could bring Sarah Greenwood to talk about Green Globes at that time. But even before we got to the meeting where we're talking about final development plan, yes, we will agree in good faith to have conversations with anyone, and certainly would have prior to tonight had we been approached about that.
Dan, okay?
I had one question. Mr. Alberti's comments about population density I want to make sure I'm remembering your prior comments that the current office building, if fully leased, would have more occupants than the proposed apartments. Am I remembering that correctly or incorrectly?
I'm not sure about the I think we're probably talking traffic, if that makes, if it's ringing a bell for me, it's ringing a bell on traffic, that it would have more trips, certainly, than the apartment building would have, and that was in our, and occupants as well.
And I just want to make sure I heard you correctly the first time. I thought you said there would be fewer actual occupants in the apartments than the office building. And then I think I'm remembering the plans correctly, that the height of the apartments as proposed is going to be less than the current office building because when you knocked off that top floor?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to make sure. Thank you.
All right, Austin, will you comment a little bit about the management of the facility?
Absolutely. We manage all of our own properties across, office, multifamily. That said, I think we are not opposed to, this consultant that I mentioned, Graystar, manages a lot of active adult as well. In the spirit of making sure we have the right manager who knows exactly how to market this thing. We're not opposed to stepping aside and bringing them in as the expert. So it'll probably be one of us, the two of our groups who manage the property. So we're going to continue to analyze that. It's a little bit of a test run.
It's a part of EPC.
They would be a separate entity that EPC would hire as part of the project.
Okay, correct. But it's not anyone currently involved in the management of the office buildings?
No.
Okay. No. All right, other questions?
I have one that just came to
Jenna?
mind. Yeah. Will there be any new employment opportunities for folks at the site?
Yeah.
Like, how many positions? 2, 10?
It'll be likely between, including lead, I'm just kind of counting in my head, between 10 and 15 maintenance and leasing staff. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And that would include, that'd be, all for that project. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Another one.
Yeah, sure.
In the development agreement, we talk about the communication between you all and the county in terms of transit, and talking about maybe, since we're on Shawnee Mission, maybe a bus line. Has there been any communication so far?
Not today. We wanted to get through this hurdle, and then as Bob said, full on go coming out of tonight.
It's on the to-do list.
Absolutely.
Cool. Thank you.
And it's in the agreement.
Yeah, it's a requirement.
It's a requirement in the agreement.
Very good.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Austin.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank
Council, any other questions for staff or our other professionals? Discussion among our group here? A few things I'd like to address that... Oh, John Allen, I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
No, I just raised my hand, so you're doing great. All right, I just wanted to make a couple comments since it's my first board meeting, having been sworn in, so or council meeting. Just to share some of my thoughts, having listened to this both at the last few board council meetings as well as having been on the Planning Commission for the last several years. I have been able to track this project very closely on the Planning Commission side in terms of all the things that went in and are going into that. And then now looking at the TIF, just some general comments. One is, it's hard to imagine, for me at least, a proposed solution that is better than what we've got in front of us today. I do think it's not perfect, but I do think it is very, very good. I think the risks of not moving forward on this one, to me, far outweigh, or do not outweigh the risk of not moving forward outweigh moving forward today with what we've got in front of us for a number of reasons, particularly if we would get a project of this size, the dilapidated state of the current building, and that not improving without some sort of project moving forward, amongst many others. So just wanted to kind of share that in my background, having been able to be a part of that on the Planning Commission as well. The one comment I just wanted to mention that I don't have concerns about today, but one, I did raise it, and I did hear one of the public comments say about the changing density of our residential population with this project. I do think that is an absolute factor. I don't have concerns about that from a reason not to move forward with the project from my perspective. But I did want to, I have mentioned this to the mayor in some of the conversations I've had while learning about the project in detail. But I do think it's something that we need to consider should the project move forward and our residential density change by this amount in future years, because we may need to look at the ward structure to make sure the wards are continue to be fairly evenly represented and distributed. But I can see that being several years down the road once, if a project were to move forward, and two, then if a project like this were to be filled with residents who then live in the city. But I just wanted to kind of mention that as one thing to be considered in the future to address any sort of residential density changes as they occur. But we don't know enough now to do anything about that, in my opinion. So anyway, those are my comments for now.
Okay. A few comments that I'd like to make that I heard during public comment that I want to address and not leave unanswered. As far as the public hearings being condensed and rushed, that cannot be farther from the truth. The public hearing was opened last month and was extended to this month, which is unusual. Usually they are not extended. We did the same thing. Now, Nathan, you're going to have to help me out here. We extended public hearing on what?
I believe it was on the project plan. Oh, I'm sorry.
Establishment of the
district. Yeah.
Okay. We extended that to three public hearings, which again is unusual. Only one public hearing is held. Those public hearings were prior to the public hearing that we're dealing with tonight, so that was not condensed. It was extended. We have published 3 or 4 constant contact notifications to the public, letting them know where we were in the process, when something was no longer a privileged conversation. It was revealed to the public in those constant contacts. Nathan shared those with you, so that's been out there. I've written about it several times in the Fairway newsletter, so I don't feel that we have not given adequate opportunity to the residents to have input into this project. a comment that was made also tonight, that this was a start of other large projects coming to Fairway. I have heard that from two other individuals, and I'll have the same conversation this evening that I did with them. I said over my dead body, and I mean that. Fairway is a single-family resident community. We're 1 square mile, and that is what we're all about. We have an opportunity here, and our comprehensive plan gives us that opportunity. The comprehensive plan looks into the future. You know, we have to think about these things. Things change. Just like our Planning Commission has gone through growth change challenges with what happens with the development of our single-family residences, the same thing is happening here in the office park. Is it good that it remain an office park for the next 20, 30 years? Well, with what's happening with the office community and what COVID has brought to us, I question that. And I have had individuals who have experience in that field alleviate my concerns that we would be destroying the office park. And so I know when I first became interested in Fairway, the rumors were flying around that we were going to turn Shawnee Mission Parkway up and down through Fairway into apartment buildings. That is not the case. That is not what we're doing here. We are giving our residents an opportunity to age in place. Because our population overall was aging, it's now beginning to turn to younger families with children. We need to give our residents an opportunity to remain in a community where they want to be. And this project does that. Another thing that was mentioned tonight was a couple of people have talked about blight. That was not a considering factor in qualifying this particular property for a TIF. It was a conservation area. There are certain criteria in order for a building to be qualified to even be considered for a TIF. Rich, if I misspeak here, correct me. And part of the requirements in this conservation area is the age of the building. And this building is 35 years old, I believe. And that meets that requirement. And so that was the particular item that qualified this project to be considered for a TIF district, not blight. Now, is that building in disrepair? Yes. Are we happy about it? No. Has that been brought to the owner of the building's attention? Many times. But that was not part of our consideration. On the advice of our attorney, who's sitting right next to me, he said that cannot be a reason for this TIF district. And it was not. Let me check my list here. Okay. Those are my comments for right now. I reserve the right to say more. Okay, I'm going to open the floor again to council. I know you made your comments a month ago. You don't have to say them again. But it'd be nice if you'd say something.
All right, here we go.
Jenna?
Yep, Jenna Borowski, Ward 4. I've been consistently skeptical of the TIF, and I remain so. Kind of stepping back, and I said some of this at the last meeting, I think these days many, if not every developer will ask for a TIF because why not? It's money. And then it's for us to decide if that makes sense. And to understand what we're doing here, the $10 million that we are up to $10 million that we're reimbursing the developer with, it has to come from somewhere, right? And so that is money that would otherwise be tax dollars. We've done a really good job of negotiating this such that Fairway proper will do really well, but our residents are members of the county. They go to the library, they go to the community college, and those are entities that the $10 million, that money would otherwise be split among the other taxing jurisdictions. So I think it's not a point to just skip over. Also, I think Fairway's an incredible place and in such a prime location that I'm not convinced that a TIF is necessary. We are right between Kansas City, Missouri, and out south. We're not in Shawnee where they're looking to develop cornfields, right? Like, we are here in Fairway, and so I think that there is real opportunity, and this is the first and only project before us. So, Mayor, to your point, like, that's what we're considering, but I do think it's important to consider what else could be provided to us. Further, to the point of what qualifies as a TIF, there are the 3 different categories, as you mentioned, and one of them is conservation, but I think Joe, or Dave rather, talked about the fact that kind of the policy behind TIFs was to get rid of blight and to kind of overcome the barriers to developers to come in and fix up areas that were blighted. We don't really have that here. Again, we're in Fairway. We're in a prime location, so I'm skeptical of the true need to have a TIF. And then I think at the end of the day, what we're talking about is how can we essentially make the investors of a private company comfortable investing in private property, right? That's what we're talking about when we're talking about rates of return. And I think we should more be focused on what makes sense for Fairway residents and the tax dollars that they're paying. And so I'll stop there, but that's my position at this time. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. I'll make some more comments. This is a huge decision for Fairway. It's not one that I personally take lightly, and I know it's not one that the council takes lightly. When we first started this process, I said to the council in one of our executive sessions, we're required to look into the future. We are being asked to be visionaries. That is very difficult to do. But that's what we're elected to do. We have a comprehensive plan that gives us guidance. Two of us on this governing body served on that committee that put the latest comprehensive plan together. That is a product of the Planning Commission. David and I served on that. A former council member, Tom Cotter, also was on that. A lot of work went into that, and we used that comprehensive plan in considering this project. And I mentioned this earlier in the evening. I was opposed to TIFs when we started this. However, the project intrigued me. I thought it was a very interesting concept for the city of Fairway. It's new to the metropolitan area. There are successful operations, I believe, Austin and Dallas and Denver. And I know this is something we need to consider. And as I said, as I learned more and more about the TIF and what our negotiators did, and I give Rich and Nathan, they were stellar in this process. And they, in the negotiation, they have worked very, very hard and have, as you've heard from our professionals, and yeah, we pay them, but they also have a reputation to maintain as professionals. And they are being professional when they are telling us that this is a city-friendly document that has been negotiated. None of them, and they've all been practicing a while, have seen an agreement that is this beneficial to a city. So we have protected the city of Fairway not only financially, yes, that's my area of expertise, I keep saying that, but that's where I feel most grounded. But I have learned so much in this process about the other areas, and Fairway is being protected. I, as you can tell, am in favor of this project. Whether or not I'll have a vote this evening, I don't know. It does require a supermajority. But I ask everyone that will be voting this evening to think about the future and what this means from a visionary point of view. I think it's a project that has a lot of merit. All right, anyone else? Last chance.
Mayor,
Dan?
I know you want us to comment more, so I'm off the hook next time when you're looking around. So, sir, I respect your opinion and thank you. Thank you for your comments tonight. You know, I run around physically the area a lot, and I'm over in Brookside sometimes, and I see that giant 20-story building that's blue or purple. I'm colorblind. Blue whale. And, yeah. So the $10 million aside, this is a better building than what's currently there. This will be an asset to the citizens of Fairway, and it's going to be a building that in 20 years is still going to look in place. I've also been skeptical about a lot of things on this, but I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time. So we've had multiple opportunities for comment, and the citizens that I'd say had an issue with one thing or another on this, their questions have been answered and they're not coming back. If we had 40 citizens right now lined up against this, I'd be absolutely no. If we had 5 citizens lined up right now absolutely against this, I'd probably be no, but they're not there. So, I mean, this is a $60 million project where there's $10 million. The citizens seem to be all right with that. So for that, you know, I finally got over the hump sometime in the near past, but I'm good with where we're at right now.
Another point, hang on just a minute. Jason, I'm sorry. Another point that I'd like, because we have new individuals here this evening. I just found this fascinating. Do you know what it costs to build a parking structure? I believe, Austin, between $25,000 a stall. So this particular parking structure is going to cost between $7 and $8 million. We have a cap on this at $10 million. A parking structure is one of the items that falls within the allowed TIF expenses. He doesn't own the land, so the land's not being considered. Basically, it's the parking structure. Am I saying something wrong?
It's essentially in some site work would be eligible expenses as well.
There's a few other, but.
And I think I would just kind of add to that a little bit. And I was talking with Rich and Dave and Kevin earlier today, and we were having a conversation about, you know, specifically to the point that Jenna was making about going out west somewhere and doing a greenfield development. The likelihood that a parking garage would be required in a greenfield development is less because there's the space to add surface parking that this particular site does not have because of its size. If we're trying to achieve the density, the parking structure is almost a necessity. So if you look at doing a greenfield development and there's not a need for a parking structure potentially, that really reduces your TIF eligible expenses in a manner that would just really equate it to site work and perhaps land acquisition. So now if it's, you all as a council determined early on that consideration for reimbursement of land acquisition wasn't going to be on the table here because the ownership hasn't changed in recent years. So, that's a different play out west or somewhere where there is greenfield development if it's newly purchased property. But, if you looked at a similar situation where it's previously owned and the council wasn't going to consider that, you'd be talking about limiting the TIF potential really to site work. So, and that's less than half of what we're looking at for the cost of the parking structure. So, I just want to put that out there that vertical construction is generally not an eligible expense in a TIF district. However, parking structures are an exemption to that restriction. So, I think it really is recognition by whomever designed the TIF statute that parking structures are presenting a unique challenge, especially for infill like this. So I wanted to include that as a part of the discussion as well.
And then that brings up another point I've learned through this. Mission is now considering a senior facility. They're just different than this one. Number one, it's market rate. Ours is not market rate. This project that we're considering is luxury. The second thing is the developer in Mission purchased the land, but they got it really cheap because it's all rock. And I mean, there's going to be some problems. They're aware of it going into this construction, but because it was, they did not need to request a TIF because it wasn't infill like we are here. EPC is very restricted. It's 5.1 acres, and that's all they've got. Jason, you're up.
Jason Rogers, Ward 1. Nathan, I'm kind of going back to the property tax comparison by distribution sheet. So as I look at this at 2%, and I guess I don't know why this just popped in my head tonight, but not to rehash. We're assuming a 2% annual growth rate, but obviously if that, 2% is if nothing is done, right? So if we just thinking that with the improvements over the project, 2% I would say an incredibly conservative view. So if it goes to 4 or if it goes to 6, the numbers really work out better for all parties involved as far as what's listed on this sheet. Is that correct? Because the appraised valuation is higher, and then therefore would change the numbers of the columns.
So I would say, and I'll rely on Rich and Kevin and Dave to correct me, I think essentially what that would do is it would get them to their cap quicker.
Okay.
And so then that would...
so the time frame would show.
Correct.
Got it. Dollar amount wouldn't change, the time frame would... Okay,
correct.
Got it. Okay.
And just to be clear, I guess while we're here, that 2% annual growth, that's the valuation of the property that we all received in the last couple of weeks, correct? Can I attest, can I fight mine right now? Or...
Nathan, can I ask a question?
Jenna, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, on this, because a resident asked me about the school district, because these numbers are different, but I thought the school district kind of opted out and wasn't really a part of this.
So there are a portion of the mills that go to the school district that are exempt from the TIF collection. So then that's why you see their number is much higher than, comparatively, their increase is much higher than anybody else's, because those mills are not able to be captured into the TIF fund. So of that $3 million increase, that is, as a result of those mills, a certain portion of their mills are exempt from being eligible for TIF collection.
Like, do you know the percentage?
Kevin Wimpy, Gilmore and Bell. The school district mills that are off limits are 28 mills total. And I should know this off the top of my head because, like Councilmember Bailey, I was looking at my valuation and doing some math a week ago. But where there are other mills for school districts, and 29.5 of the total mills by state law are off limits for TIF. And for school districts, again, it's the 20 mills of base valuation, which is the statewide levy, and then the 8 mills of capital outlay, which is the local levy for those expenditures.
And what is the other 1.5 mil?
That's the state's building levy. It's the state's property taxes.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Questions, comments? David?
Well, you want to encourage comment, you said, and I did comment at length, it's probably my medal, last month, so I don't want to repeat myself, but I do have a slightly different perspective, Jenna, than you. Are you shocked? No. Wow. I look at it, and I look at this, and I look at who I was elected by, Fairway residents to take care of Fairway. I wasn't elected by the county to take care of the county, JUCO to take care of JUCO. But even with this, we're still taking care of them, and we took care of the fire district above and beyond that too. So I think we've done a tremendous job for our residents in terms of the impact on our taxes. We're going to be bringing in a lot more money. We'll have to see how it pans out to what extent we have to have increased expenses for public safety. But it is possible that this could result in a lower mill levy for our residents if our expenses are lower than the fee payments that we're getting, our increased expenses. If we didn't have any extra expenses, we did not have to hire another police officer, we could have our taxes as residents go down because we wouldn't be covering that expense. We're anticipating that we're going to have to cover extra expenses, which is why we negotiated for this extra fee. So I don't think this will reduce our taxes, but it's possible that it could. But I still see this as a win, especially for the school district. They're getting $3.8 million through this project during the TIF period, which I think that's a lot. That's a lot of extra money for the school district. So I view that as a tremendous win for our school district. And I go back to my final assessment, where are we without the project versus where are we with the project? And unfortunately, we haven't had anyone knocking on our door saying, let's deny this project because we'll come in and buy the property from them. We haven't heard them say, that's why I asked them tonight, will this project go forward? They don't have a no. And they haven't said they have an alternative plan B. And I look at that building, and as I said last month, it's not going to get knocked down by them if this doesn't go through. It can't, because for the next developer, as Dave mentioned, if they want to ask for TIF help to redevelop it, even into an office building with a parking garage, that building has to be there. If it is raw ground, there won't be a TIF. And all that they're avoiding by knocking it down for the new owner is the demolition cost. So if any new project involves a parking garage, well, it won't. Whatever that new project is won't involve a parking facility because they won't be able to afford it. I can't believe it costs that much for a parking space, but I looked it up. It does. I don't know what goes into that. I should be in the parking garage business. But so I do agree with the mayor on I think this is a great diversification for our residents, not just Fairway, but other residents in the area who, I'll be there at some point before you, maybe. I do like gardening still, but I think this is a great option for our residents to be able to have that as an alternative to stay in the area, because I do love the area. And if I get to move to an apartment like this, I'd rather be in Fairway than someplace else, because I do like the area. So I think, I don't like the unknown. This is a known, it's the bird in the hand versus the, I wish, but I just want to have that other option out there. So I think this is an overall win-win for us. So I hope we, and I hope I'm around to see how it pans out at the end. That
You will be,
actually is my
David.
biggest hope.
You're not going anywhere.
Well, you never know.
No, you're not.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments, questions? All right, I will entertain a motion.
Mayor,
Joe?
I'd like to propose, this is Judge 11, Ward 3, I'd like to propose that we approve Ordinance 1760, an ordinance of the governing body of the City of Fairway, Kansas, making findings, adopting a redevelopment project plan pursuant to Kansas SAA 12-170 at Sigwater, and amendments thereto, and approving a redevelopment agreement.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we approve ordinance number 1760. Nathan, I would ask for a roll call vote, please.
Keys?
Yes.
Levin?
Aye.
Bailey?
Yes.
Rogers?
Yes.
Busick?
No.
Watkins?
Go to John Allen first.
Oh, I'll get to him here.
Sorry, you don't have to.
Go ahead. Watkins?
Yes.
Broski?
No.
Smith?
Yes.
Final count, Nathan?
6-2 in favor.
All right. That is a supermajority, so I will not be voting this evening. It passes, ordinance 1760 passes 6-2. All right, we will move on to item C on the new agenda, or new business. Consider resolution number 2022B, a resolution determining the intent of the City of Fairway, Kansas to issue its industrial revenue bonds in the amount not to exceed $27 million to finance the costs of acquiring, constructing, and equipping a commercial project for the benefit of Fairway AA, LLC, and its successors and assigns. Sales tax exemption only. Your turn again.
Thanks, Mayor. Kevin Wimpy, Gilmore and Bell, the city's bond counsel. I'll do a quick overview. I know we've been over it some months ago, but general principles and process here with industrial revenue bonds. As stated then, IRBs in this instance are just being used as a vehicle for granting an incentive, and the requested incentive is sales tax exemption on construction materials and furniture, fixtures, and equipment for the project. And so as the developer spends money on those materials for the project site, the sales tax would be foregone on those items. The bonds, when issued, will be what we call buy your own bond, where the company purchases its own bond, and the city's not liable for repayment of that bond, and it doesn't affect the city's credit rating. So it's not outstanding. You're probably more familiar with general obligation bonds the city might issue for infrastructure. This IRBs are different here, and particularly when the company's purchasing its own bond. The process at a high level is a two-step process from the council's vantage point. Step one is tonight with the consideration of a resolution of intent, and step two would be closer to final construction or completion of the project typically, and at that point you would consider an ordinance authorizing the issuance of the IRBs to reimburse or pay for project costs. So with step one tonight, this is an indication of the council's intent to ultimately issue those bonds and grant the incentive. And the legal effect of tonight is that the developer could access its sales tax exemption certificate and move forward and proceed with purchasing materials on an exempt basis. So it's a very strong indication you would ultimately grant the incentive and finalize that with the issuance of the bonds in the future. And with that, I'll step aside and answer any questions.
Council, do you have questions for Kevin?
I know we've talked about this in the past. I don't remember going into specific details or seeing, I guess, some of this language in this resolution. So the number 27 million is in there, and also I have a number in my head of 3 million. what does the 27 million mean?
Sure. Yeah, so I think the developer tonight's been referring to 60+ million of overall project costs. And for new construction in Kansas, by separate statute, outside of the IRBs, labor is an exempt cost, so they don't need bonds for their labor costs. What they do need it for are the actual materials purchases and the furniture, fixtures, and equipment. And so the 27 million is their estimate of those costs that make up a percentage of the 60+ million. So 27 million is their estimation of materials and FF&E.
So then what is the rate that's being exempt on that 27 million?
Good question. So the Kansas sales tax could be its own CLE, but it's usually destination based. And so if materials are being purchased and delivered to the project site, it'd be your local sales tax. Obviously the state is the biggest percentage of that at 6.5%. And I wouldn't guess at all the local components, but I know the county and city are closer to the 1%, or county's just under 2%. So those are the three entities foregoing sales tax here.
I mean, when I'm figuring in sales tax in my head, I'm thinking 10%. I mean, that's relatively speaking the number we're talking about here?
That's a good gross estimate. So if you take 27 million, their savings would be just under 3 million, like you said.
Thank you.
I have a question, and just a process.
Janet, go ahead.
Process question. It might not be for you, but this is not included in the redevelopment agreement.
There was a provision in the redevelopment agreement related to economic development revenue bonds, which is also a term for IRBs, or industrial revenue bonds.
So have we already agreed to that when we just voted now, is my question.
It was contained. I don't have the exact language, but I think it is the intent of the development agreement to also grant the issuance of the bonds.
Rich, can you address that? Hang on, Jen, just a minute.
Yeah, so Section 4.4 of the development agreement does contain some language about the issuance of the IRBs here. But it states that that's subject to all applicable laws and requirements and subject to further compliance by the developer with all city requirements for the issuance of the economic development bonds. So it contemplates us doing it, but I think as it presupposes that this was approved, is the way I would characterize that.
And I'll say the issuance of bonds or those types of legislative things are fully within the purview of the city council, so it's not necessarily something we can bind the council to do by agreement, but again, that's part of the two-step process where there's a resolution of intent to kick it off, and then ultimately the ordinance is considered later on. So it's at the council's discretion, but it certainly was mentioned in the development agreement.
And so we've given the impression that that's something we're going to agree to by passing the development agreement.
I agree with that.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yes.
All right, any other questions for Kevin? Thank you, Kevin. All right, I will open the floor for public comment on item C. Is there anyone? Yes, please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Yes, my name's Skip Hensler. I live at 5657 State Park Road. I commend these developers for what they're going to do, but I do have some questions. I've been coming to the most current meetings here. I'm just trying to get a good understanding. Are these residents, are they going to be luxury apartments, or are they going to be residents to purchase?
No, this is rental only.
Rental only. Also, too, in the development in terms of cost, the projected cost of these units in today's economy, and what it costs to do things, and if the economy goes south, is the city going to be stuck with the economy changing, lack of sales?
Well, they're not sales.
Or lack of rentals, I'm sorry, lack of rentals.
Rich, can you address that for me?
I'm not quite sure if I really know how to address that. It's hard to anticipate what the economy is going to do in the future, so I really struggle with kind of speculating how to answer that question, but
Well, I think it's a very important question to ask regard to, you know, what could happen in the next year.
Yeah,
or
I
2
will.
years.
We'll say, you know, financial projections were provided by the developer, and they've been reviewed thoroughly by staff and other members of the city council here, and they felt comfortable with the projections that were in place. And again, it's speculative. We don't know what the future holds, but we feel confident that the project, that the numbers presented to us were accurate and a feasible project.
I might be hearing what I want to hear here, but are you asking if everything goes south, if the city's going to be left holding a bag and owing somebody a bunch of money?
No.
Yes. Partially, yes. Yes.
That's
partially,
what I heard.
So
no.
Let me see if I can answer that question. So the development agreement locks in the cap on the TIF increment. So it locks in the maximum amount that the city would reimburse the developer, regardless of what happens with inflation between now and years from now. So that cap, regardless of what happens with the economy, regardless of what happens with their expenses to build the project, our cap is firm. It's set. So, and that's the cap we've all agreed to here tonight. The other thing I would say is whether or not they're at 10% occupancy or 100% occupancy is of little concern to Fairway from the financial perspective, if that's what your concern is, because the fees that they're paying the city are not tied to their occupancy rate. So they're paying those fees whether they have 2 apartments leased or if they have all 220 leased. Those fees still come to the city of Fairway. If they are unable to fully lease or majority lease or rent their units, that could have an impact when the appraiser comes around and does his annual appraisal, because part of their appraisal for a commercial property like this would be based on their revenue potential. So, but again, that would impact their assessed valuation, which would only harm them in the long run because it would reduce the amount of money they would be eligible for reimbursement for. If the property doesn't perform in a manner they expect it to, and their property values are less, that's less TIF money for them, but our fees that we have negotiated with them remain constant for the life of the TIF, if that answers your question.
I couldn't believe it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Skip. Any other public comment? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Hi, neighbor.
Hi, how are you? I'm Steve Platt. I'm at 5348 Chadwick. And, you know, I appreciate the council's look at this from the financial point of view, because I think that's really important. And what I don't fully understand is how we authorize a industrial revenue bond and not have any obligation to it for some reason. So it's more of a question from my point of view, because I need to probably be brought up to speed a little bit on it. But the length of term on the bonds, how they're going to be repaid, what draws the developer can take against that, because obviously they're going to make a profit on their development up front, but what keeps us kind of whole from that point of view with some kind of security. And if the project doesn't come through as anticipated, does the city of Fairway have any say in how this property would be managed? Because otherwise we will have a multifamily building that if these guys abandon or don't succeed or that type of thing, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to dismiss you. I'm just trying to look at the possibilities going out in the future that, you know, something could happen, and all of a sudden we have 200 units that are relatively small that we want to make sure are luxurious and get good rents. If it's not for this project as it is, and there's some type of financing that we as the city have kind of agreed to. So those are kind of the security type of questions that I have, and hopefully you can just kind of make me feel at ease, you know. And
Well,
then-
we'll try, Steve.
And then I'm going to say one other thing too, just because residents have a funny way of coming back against businesses, and that is my property taxes were 6%, not 2%, for the increase. So that part of it, and then as we're seeing, there is a shift in the county right now, just of residents taking a bigger burden than businesses on projects. We're accepting that.
But in this case, now I'm going to stop you there. I don't usually interrupt. Fairway is not doing that.
Understood.
Okay.
Understood.
I just want to make sure that that point was clear.
We're getting more taxes. We would get more if it was without those types of things. I like the concept that we are getting more, which helps us from the city point of view. So don't get me wrong. It's just overall,
I understand.
residents are hitting more of the burden than businesses, but that's the market right now and that type of thing. So, you know, that's not a complaint against you guys by any means. It's just a public comment, just to
Understand.
get my 2 cents worth.
Well, you've given us quite a conglomeration of questions there. I will agree with you, Steve, that I had to sit down several times and have a conversation with myself about industrial revenue bonds, because they're contrary to the way that I have ever thought about a bond. They just are. And Nathan gave me an explanation today that made sense finally, because it's an idiosyncrasy of the state law. It's paper. Would you explain that?
I'm actually going to let Kevin explain it because he'll do way better
Okay, Kevin,
than I will.
you explain it.
Kevin Wimpy, Gilmore and Bell. I jotted down, I think, questions, and by all means, if I overlook one, someone put your hand up and guide me back to that. So I think, first of all, the term of the bonds. So for IRBs, usually are outstanding a little longer than the construction period, so it'll be a very short-term bond. City liability repayment source. So the city is not liable for repayment of the bonds. Again, the company itself will purchase its own bond, make debt service payments to itself. So again, it's not a real financing mechanism. Instead, it's a vehicle for granting this incentive. So the company, as purchaser of the bond, will pay itself debt service payments on its own bond and ultimately redeem its own bond when it matures and they finish construction.
The unusual nature of these bonds.
Yeah, the company sits on one
Fairway
end.
has no liability.
Right, yeah. The developer sits on one end as purchaser and on the other end as the developer, and interposed between them is a bond trustee through which the funds are flowed. Similarly, that's how construction draws are made by the developer as it's drawing down on its IRB. Finally, I think the question was asked, what if the project fails? And I think under the development agreement, we'd call that a default, and there'd be no incentives. The incentive structure would collapse, including the bonds. If I've overlooked something, please feel free to shout.
David Washington, the development agreement 4.4 on its face says the bond shall be repaid within 12 months of completion of the project. So there is a finite, but they have to pay themselves back. I mean, it's right pocket, left pocket. The bonds are issued. They buy the bonds. They're paying themselves. The city is not in the middle. There's no economic risk to the city in this aspect of the transaction.
But only a public entity
Can issue the bonds.
can issue the bonds. So see, that's why it's kind of a paper shuffle, which is a simplistic term, but only the city can issue the bonds.
We issue them, the developer buys them. It's the developer's risk at that point. They own them. They owe themselves the money. They're the owner of the bonds. They service their own debt.
Mayor, if I might also, we have a whole section in the agreement that is dedicated to the age restrictions and the requirements that are on the developer to maintain those age restrictions. And if those restrictions are not maintained, there are built-in provisions that reduce the amount of the TIF that they receive. And it's multi-layered. So Rich earlier described them as sort of a minor miss, a medium miss, and then a major miss on achieving the benchmark that we're using is through the Fair Housing Act, which requires at least 80% of the units have someone 55 years of age or older residing in the unit. So if they don't maintain that 80% mark and they fall below that, there are penalties in the contract that will reduce potentially up to 50% or reduce up to 50% of the TIF, or in the worst case scenario, it would require them to come back into the city council and essentially defend why the city should not terminate the TIF district entirely. So those provisions are built into the agreement to ensure that that delivery is met on the concept of 55 plus. Mayor, John Allen did have his hand raised. It's down. I'm not sure, John Allen, if you wanted to make a comment or not.
John Allen, go ahead.
No, my question was answered. Thank you.
Okay.
And Steve, that provision, and for anyone who's interested, if you want to get online, because the agreement's online, it's 7.10. 7.10 addresses the requirement to maintain the adult nature of the project and the consequences of what happens, or potential consequences of what happens if those standards aren't met.
All right, any other public comment? Nathan, is there anyone? You're welcome. Is there any other one in Zoom? Okay. All right, we'll close public comment on item C. And council, I'll turn it back to you. Are there any questions, additional questions, or discussion among the council members? I see none. Is there a motion concerning Resolution 2022B?
Mayor, Tanya Keys, Ward 4. I move we approve Resolution 2022B, which is a resolution determining the intent of the City of Fairway, Kansas to issue its industrial revenue bonds in the amount not to exceed $27 million to finance the cost of acquiring, constructing, and equipping a commercial project for the benefit of Fairway AA LLC and its successors, and assigns the sales tax exemption only.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we approve Resolution 2022B. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All right, it is 6 yes, 2 no. The motion passes. All right, moving on to item D. Consider ordinance number 1758, an ordinance amending the Fairway Development ordinances pertaining to solar energy systems, amending and repealing existing sections 15-235, 15-298, and 15-798 of the Fairway Development ordinances. Nathan, are you leading staff discussion on this?
I'm going to turn it over to Kim.
Kim,
since,
all right, Kim.
She's here.
Okay, go right ahead.
All right. I wasn't quite prepared to speak on it, so
okay. You'll do fine.
So the governing body remanded this back to the Planning Commission, and they Councilwoman Busick had sent an email that she said we could forward to the Planning Commission on comments, and then I think Chairwoman Bailey mentioned that she knew a council member that had another concern, and so she she discussed that. And based on, the input from the council and the review of the minutes, there were a couple modifications made. Essentially, the Planning Commission still wanted to have the ability to review solar systems. So that's in section 15235. That is what kicks in Planning Commission reviewing a project. And so you'll see in the R1 district, adds or replaces a portion of a building more than 50%. That's been in there all along. Adds an entirely new principal building. Any application, regardless of size or impact, that requests an exception. Those have all been on the books for a while, and now they're adding the solar energy system. One of the discussion points was freestanding. We've only had one in Fairway. Most are roof mounted. So planning said, while initially they were opposed to that, they would consider it through an exception process. So that is under the section 15298, special conditions for uses. So this is where we put certain items that are within the R1 that are considered a special use. Private swimming pools, home occupation licenses, accessory buildings, play structures, anything within that the planning would consider if it didn't meet code. And so that's where the solar systems is going to go. And if you look on page 4 of that section, they added, so the red line is what was originally. Then highlighted in yellow is the addition based on the discussion from planning from what the city council discussed. So they added may be located on the roof or side of the building, which I think addresses what Councilman Bailey had a question on regarding some structures. Then under item E, that's where they state planning could consider an exception for mounting on the ground based on the exception criteria below, which is the same exception criteria if you were applying for something else within this section and you're asking an exception. And then one other thing, though, that they did add that I don't think it was brought up by the council, but they wanted to, on the site plan, identify trees that would be removed from the property for a project. The city does not regulate trees on private property, but at the same time, I think they felt like, and Councilman Smith can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the thought process there was that we are the city of the trees. We've put a lot of effort into the right-of-way trees, and while we don't regulate the private trees, they're still an asset. They are viewed as an asset, let me say that. And then there's just a couple items, it's cleanup. And then we have the definition under definitions for solar energy systems. So I hope that gives you an
That's
idea
good
of what
summary, Kim.
they considered at the last meeting when it was sent back. I think the biggest item is the consideration of freestanding, which before that was expressly prohibited.
Okay.
And Mayor, if I could.
Go ahead, John Allen.
Yeah, so having been on the Planning Commission up until this most recently coming meeting, Kim did a great job of summarizing two other points that we talked about at length. One, to the point on the trees, having freestanding in people's yards, definitely wanted to make sure people were not clearing property of trees to have solar farms in place, was the idea there. There was a comment, I believe, at the last city council meeting as well of any cost prohibition of this moving forward. It is a $75 fee currently to get a permit. It's a $150 fee to go to Planning Commission, so there is an additional $75 charge. However, developing an application process that would be very clear, concise, and for staff to administer the Planning Commission was under the impression at this point, with how rapidly this technology is evolving, that coming up with such basically a checklist would be very challenging. And it's actually more open to do it this way so that we can actually potentially approve more solar panel options without having to go through exception processes in this way. Although that does charge an extra $75 for that extra Planning Commission piece, these systems are usually in the $20,000 to $30,000 range. So seems like a very, very nominal fee to have the Planning Commission be able to review them entirely, as well as hopefully come up with better checklists and more approval processes as the technology kind of settles down potentially. But that's just some comments I was going to share as well.
Thank you, John Allen. Your dual role is appreciated. Okay, hang on a minute. All right, Kim, is there anything else? Okay.
No, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Council will open it up to questions for staff or discussion. Now, Kelly, go ahead.
It's Kelly Busick, Ward 1. Thank you for your synopsis. That was really helpful. I do have a couple things to say about that. One thing I will note in the transcript of that meeting, it said that the average cost of the system was about $30,000.
That is strictly based on the applications that we've been receiving. Yeah.
Okay.
So, in fact, I think we've had about 4 or 5, and they've all been right in the 30,000 range.
So, but I did some research, and I found that the average cost of a mid-range 6-kilowatt system that's about 600 square feet of panels, it was between $12,000 and $18,000. Anyway, I sent my information to Nathan, and then Kim got the information to give to the PC committee about the SolSmart model ordinances that are designed to promote solar and simplify the cost and administrative burden and the application process. Those are my notes. It partners with about 24 other advocacy groups, and including the National League of Cities, the National Association of Counties, the Great Plains Institute, and it has helped bring solar-friendly language at no charge to over 450 communities of all sizes in 41 states, covering over 100 million people. Johnson County is a SolSmart county. Our sister city, Shawnee, is a SolSmart city. Ms. Laura McCalla, who some of you probably may already know, is a SolSmart advisor for the Mid-American Regional Council and was working with about 26 other jurisdictions to get solar ready. Mr. Noller Sunderman, city manager for Shawnee and Nathan's counterpart, states that we're excited to participate in the SolSmart program. This program shows our neighbors we are ready to help by allowing solar by right accessory use in all zones. Residential zones in particular do not require special permits or public PC hearings. In their cases, roof-mounted systems up to 15 kilowatts, that's about 1,500 square feet of panels, and ground-mounted systems up to 144 square feet and no higher than 6 feet are allowed. Ground-mounted systems can also be placed on poles without compromising any green space at all. So based on this information, I can't support the proposed changes to our code unless there's an accommodation for small roof systems to bypass PC review. It makes no sense to have a 400 square foot solar panel on a roof require a site plan and a PC hearing. Yourself and Director Alani, whose former employer is Kansas City, Missouri, it's a SolSmart city also, you have well over 50 years combined experience evaluating and approving applications. That should suffice in most cases. Joco, Shawnee, and more than 400 other communities think their approach is balanced, one that protects solar rights and community interests. And I think that will work in Fairway too. So I urge my colleagues to consider the SolSmart program. Even better, why don't we invite Laura and Nolan to come here and give a 10-minute presentation to describe their program and its benefits, and they'll be able to address any concerns that we have, and they can answer your questions. Thank you.
All right, is there anyone else on the council? Dan?
So Kelly, I'm not trying to put you on the spot with details, but did I hear there that this would bypass planning commission or bypass getting a permit and planning commission?
No, it would just planning commission.
Okay.
You'd have to have a permit.
May I?
This is
John
if I
Allen,
could,
go ahead.
Yeah. I would just add that Planning Commission's been discussing this for several months. I can't remember, Kim would have to keep me honest, but
It started in October?
Yeah, at least. I think we've had some discussions even before then, but actual specific language around October. We also had an open public hearing, had no one attend and share any of this information at the open public hearing, nor anyone attend recently. So just from a Planning Commission perspective, I feel like that would be the forum for this kind of information to be shared. Obviously, the governing body here has authority to approve it, but don't want to circumvent the Planning Commission's role either by not using those forums.
Jenna?
Yeah, I think that's actually a nice segue into what I was thinking, which is kind of what the role is of the Planning Commission versus what the role is of the council. And I think kind of the approach the Planning Commission took, which I understand, was, okay, we don't have anything on the books, let's set up a way to regulate this. I think as a council, our role is to set the policy, and so if there are things that we want to be encouraging, like solar, or not discouraging, given that sustainability is one of our core principles, then I think it's good that we're thinking about, like, it's just kind of serving a different purpose, and so I don't know if the planning, I watched 2 Planning Commission meetings. I noticed no one came to the public hearing. But I think it is worthwhile if we as a council want to encourage solar, and there's already a checklist or a template out there. I have not seen it, but I trust Kellyanne has done her work, that's worth considering. And maybe it's putting that back in front of the Planning Commission. But I do think this is a good time to talk about it because we're coming with a new set of eyes. And I know that you guys have been working on it for months, and I think that's great. But I do think that our core values from the council perspective need to also be considered. Thank you.
I don't disagree with either of you, but unlike a $60 million building that they're going to start working on tomorrow, this language can change any time again. I don't know anything about this program, but I think what I heard was, and maybe going to what Jenna was saying, to encourage it, maybe it removes some rules that would apply to some other things within the city. And right now, I mean, it's the Wild West. You can do what you want. So I'd rather get some language on the books and then have the discussion and tweak it if we need to later. But there's ways to get solar on your property. I still think most of the citizenry would expect their neighbors, they want the neighbors to follow the rules.
Yeah, David Watkins, Ward 3. Dan, you kind of stole my thunder there. My thought in hearing the comments is, I don't think this is an either-or situation. I think I appreciate, John Allen, all the work you and the rest of the Planning Commission have done on this. I think we can implement this ordinance and then provide this type of information to the Planning Commission and have them evaluate it, because that's where I think this type of, it's not for us to decide our zoning code, it's up to the Planning Commission. So let's provide that information to them, get something on the books so we have some guidance for our residents. And if the Planning Commission feels that there's a better approach, let's let them let's let them approve it and thus recommend it to the council down the road. So I think it can be one or the other. And I will say, I walk my dog down Reinhardt, dogs, plural, Kilhan, and it's not 144 square feet. They're lovely people. It's huge. It's probably 16 by 30 at least. It's close to 500. It's really big. And it takes up the entire side of the yard. I know it's an accessory structure, so there's going to be a setback requirement. It goes as close to the back property line as the setback would allow. It goes as close to the side property line as the setback. It is elevated. It's up. But I was trying to gauge the size of the panels because I did not trespass and go in their backyard. and I'm trying to gauge it against my height, but there are probably, I think it's 4 foot, and there are 4 of them, so that's why I think it's 16. But it's probably at least 12 feet, and I guessed it to be 30 or more feet on the length. It's a big old structure. So I think that's what, and I have had several very well-intended neighbors say, what can we do about that thing in the backyard?
David,
and the neighbors are really, they're very nice people.
I have too.
Yeah.
They've specifically called it out to me.
They love the neighbors, they just don't like the thing in their backyard. So I think we have to be very careful there about the size of a freestanding structure.
And that one will be grandfathered in.
Yeah, well, I think it would be, the
Yeah.
way we normally do our rules. But
Yeah.
but I'd like to move this forward personally, and then with guidance to the Planning Commission that when they get provided with this information, which I think is excellent, let's figure out if there's better language down the road that works. But I think this is a good first step to get something there so we have at least some structure. Thank you.
Kelly, go ahead.
I think that Soul Smart should have been, I don't know why it wasn't investigated. I mean, solar has been around for 50 years, but in Johnson County is a Soul Smart county. And I don't understand why, if we have that resource, it's not something that's hidden. It's something that's there. It's something that's on their website. You can go see it, why it wasn't incorporated or looked at to use their language, use their experience, so our residents can benefit from that, and we don't have to pay for that. And we're getting top knowledge from a company that was funded by the Department of Energy, and they're a nonprofit. So that was my concern, that there was something already there for the taking that we could have employed and looked at and helped form the language with the Planning Commission, and then helped go further down the road. So we'd already be down the road, and so you wouldn't be dealing with what you're dealing with now. Because I totally understand that, and I'm sorry for you.
If I could just address what we did, I was not aware of this Soul Smart. I went and researched neighboring cities, their language on solar energy. So Mission Hills, Roland Park, City of Mission. And so most of the language was reviewed from them. Ordinances, why recreate the wheel? You know, if you've got other cities that have already gone through the process. And then it was kind of tweaked with what Fairway wants. I know staff doesn't want to make this process onerous for any resident. And I will say, you know, having been here 18 years, I've seen this code, Chapter 15 change numerous times. And, you know, staff has always been a proponent of whatever we could get through for the residents to speed up the process. You know, it used to be if you touched 25% of any facade, you had to go to planning. And, you know, we were like, we're approving it anyway. Could you just let staff get this approved? And so, and I think PC recognized that they were just, and it's my hopes that what kicks in this site plan review won't be a requirement for very long. You know, I did suggest, could we discuss a square footage on a roof that is small enough to just let it go through? And I think planning just wanted to see what is being presented, because it is coming on us pretty fast. We haven't had very many solar systems. I mean, I think we've had now 4 in the last 6 months. So it's really just all of a sudden coming on us. And I would be optimistic that after planning sees, a few, that maybe this language could be tweaked again. Maybe this component that kicks in the site plan review can be removed.
May I comment, Mayor?
Go ahead, Jenna.
Yeah. I kind of, given where we're at, that we're not seeing a ton of them right now, I don't know what the time sensitivity is to putting something forward when we have potentially another option to consider. So I know that there's been time spent on it, and that's valuable time. I don't mean to disvalue or not value that, but it's not like, to Dan's point, they need to start building, constructing right now. I mean, each of the applications you have, one pending currently, or two pending currently?
Yeah, we just issued 2 permits for what, in the last 4 months, I believe.
So I wonder if, because there's not a ton pending, if it doesn't make sense to continue the conversation based on what Kellyanne is raised, just procedurally. And then the next thing is just, I do feel compelled to say that I don't take offense to the solar panels. I understand your point. It's been made every time this comes up, but I really think it is something that is done on somebody's private property, which we care a ton about, in their own space, and it's something that's done for the benefit of literally everyone, because the idea is they're using renewable energy. And so the fact that we're constantly like, oh my goodness, look at this solar panel is slightly concerning to me. And so I want to make it clear that I don't find that offensive. I think it's actually very noble that somebody's trying to do something for the greater good. That's it.
Mayor,
With
if I
the
could,
exception of, hang on a minute, John Allen, with the exception of the one on Reinhardt, and they are a lovely couple, but what that has done to the enjoyment of their neighbors' properties themselves, it drive by it.
And I want to make sure, I'm not opposed to solar.
No.
I think the roof mounted and the sidewall mounted for the nature of Fairway are more than adequate. So it's just drive by and look at it.
John Allen?
And yeah, I would just say the Planning Commission comments are all around, pro-green energy, continue to move the code in a forward direction on green energy. But there are things that can happen with green energy that can negatively affect people's neighbors, right? So something like has been mentioned on Reinhardt, but even things such as putting up solar panels that would have reflective properties directly into other people's neighboring windows. And those are kind of some of the things that we were talking about on Planning Commission that we could look at should that be submitted. But I would just encourage the council not to continue this again. And as this is a continuing evolving issue that will continue to have more improvements in the code, but to address the good work the Planning Commission has done, and city council members are able to attend open hearings and Planning Commission meetings, and I would attend those that have concerns to do so, to share their thoughts rather than potentially block this from moving forward without going through the regular approval channels.
I just want to clarify that this is part of this is the approval process, right? The council gets to approve these things. So I don't, again, you've spent a lot of time on this and I get that, but this is an appropriate space for Kellyanne and others to bring forward concerns because the council gets to decide.
Agree that you can bring them forward here, but also to bring them forward where the work is done in the Planning Commission if there's passionate thoughts and ideas. That's helpful. Rather than, a back and forth between bodies.
John Allen, this is Kelly. They struck out the anti-glare. Is that correct?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
The anti-glare analysis that was taken out.
That was taken out to make it easier to not have to perform an anti-glare analysis, but it's pretty easy to see how things like that could be proposed without an anti-glare analysis. We were trying to make it as easy as possible.
Usually, though, that's with industrial that they have an issue with glare. Your windows, you have glare. Your headlights, you have glare. However, I understand what you're saying about that. I could have come, but I did not. I was not aware, unfortunately. But this is the place that we come and we talk about these things and we hash them out and we work on them because we represent the citizens of all of Fairway, not just my ward or Jenna's ward or David's ward or your ward. So I'm trying to make this an easier process for everyone involved. I know it's coming in the back end, but I think in light of our sustainability and how we feel about being green, I think that if we became a Soul Smart city and we got their assistance, I think that would mean a lot to our citizens since we're trying so hard to really engage in looking forward and being more reliable, have reliable resources and reusable resources. So thank you.
I'm having trouble formulating what I want to say tonight, I think. Soul Smart might be what the city wants to do. I mean, it really might be. The only thing I think this does tonight, we've already delayed it a month, is it stops somebody from tomorrow filling their entire backyard up with solar panels. And, I mean, you can have the opinion, and any of us can have our own opinions here, but it's, again, up to the citizens of the city. So all it does is stop something tomorrow. We can always change it. I just want to keep going back to that point, because I think everybody pretty much here is for green energy, but we've got to have more discussion about filling your whole backyard up with solar panels.
Totally agree, Dan. I agree with you. Kim, can I ask you a question about that? So if there's someone to come in with a permit and ask if they're going to do a solar panel, freestanding, what kind of what is?
We don't have anything.
You don't have anything yet.
For example,
so that's
the
what you're saying.
The freestanding solar system, the city looked at all what we had on the books, and the only thing we could think to do was treat it like a sort of an accessory structure.
Okay.
So like a shed. So we made them meet the side setback and the rear. The panels are actually higher than the 6-foot privacy fence between them and the neighbors,
okay.
the way they tilt. Okay. So then, a shed can be, yes. 8 foot is the mark for which you have to start increasing the setback. Mm-hmm. So if you put a shed that's 10 foot tall to the peak, you've got to increase your setback 2 foot from the side. Okay. So these are 8 foot at their highest point, and then because there were no pads underneath them, cement pads, it technically wasn't a non-permeable surface. So when we are looking at all the requirements on the code, we're looking at green space requirements, trying to maintain green space, setbacks so that they're not right next to an adjacent property. And we limit the number of accessories, so you're limited to only one accessory structure. So there's multiple things going in, and we didn't have anything on it, so we simply treated it like an accessory structure.
Thank you.
And I'd add that none of the neighboring city codes that we reviewed when crafting this referenced Soul Smart or any process related to that.
Can I ask him, like, the ones that are pending?
Janet, can you speak into your mic?
You bet. The applications that are pending now, there are applications pending, even though we don't have anything on the books. There's still some reason why people are, like, nobody to your knowledge has put up solar panels without first asking or like filled up their backyard.
No, it requires a permit. Oh, excuse me, I don't need to lean in as much. There's electrical hookups and stuff involved, and so everyone knows that they need the permits. So the contractors that are selling these, they know that they've got to pull the permit because there are hookups into the system. And it's the ones pending right now, it's simply because Basil is not, he's in training. But there's no reason for staff to hold them up.
So I guess what I'm trying to get at, though, is there are already some kind of checks in place to make sure we don't have, like, things that seem outrageous, like the fact that you need a permit, the fact that we have limits on permeable space, or like there are other things in our code that would prevent the situation, or not, maybe.
No, there's not. There's not, and that's why we had to fill this gap. Was the only thing that it requires a permit for is to make sure electrical meets our code for the hookups, permeability. But there's nothing to prevent someone from clearing an entire lot, putting up an entire field of, solar panels and doing that. And I don't think that's what the residents of Fairway, are looking for as the city of trees, or, we all want green energy.
I appreciate that explanation. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. David Watkins, getting more through. What I did like also about the revised proposal from the Planning Commission is it doesn't preclude a freestanding structure. They're not prohibited. You just have to basically ask for permission through the exception process. So I think for now, to me, that's a great place to be. And then we can all learn more about this alternative approach, and we change with the coordination of the Planning Commission. We do change Chapter 15 a lot. I was on the committee that changed it a whole lot the last time, but it is a document that has evolved quite a bit over the years, and I anticipate will continue to evolve over the years.
All right, anyone else?
Mayor, if I might just add in a few comments here.
Sure.
One, I guess previously we heard a concern about the fees being cost prohibitive for this process, and I think even Kellyanne, to your point that the cheaper systems that are out there range in the $10,000+ amount. I don't think an extra $75 in the application fee to go to Planning Commission is going to be considered cost prohibitive given the cost of the project in of itself. The other thing I would add is, I'm happy to look into it with Kim regarding what Shawnee and other cities around the area have done. But I would say that Fairway probably has in the top 5 most restrictive building codes in Johnson County. Per capita, we probably have the most tear down and rebuilds of any city in Johnson County. So the fact that our process is very restrictive, it doesn't discourage. And so I think that's an important thing to point out, that Fairway has been consistent in wanting projects to be done right. So we require permits for things that many other cities don't require permits for. We require licensed contractors performing work that other cities having the same work performed would not require a contractor's license. It is, again, to maintain the quality of the community, and it's for the safety of the residents. So I guess I'm somewhat unapologetic if the process is a bit burdensome because we want to make sure that it's done right. But to Kim's point, the more burdensome we make it on the residents, the more burdensome it is on staff. None of us are supportive of making things unreasonably burdensome.
No.
So I think, to David's point, I do think it is important to start the clock on some regulations regarding this matter. We all know at least once every other month, we are introducing an ordinance to change the code. It's a living, breathing document that reflects the current values, commitments of the city. So to say that we adopt these regulations tonight and start some form of regulation where we currently have none, I think provides a great benefit to the residents of Fairway. Do we need to tweak it down the road? I guarantee you we're going to have to tweak it down the road. Now, when, how, that's yet to be seen, but it's not as if we pass this tonight and we're going to take a 12-month break before we look at any modifications. As time allows, staff will work with the Planning Commission and we will try to make sure that our code is the best that it can be. But I don't think it's fair to just simply cite another city as adopting this Solar Smart program and suggest that that's an apples-to-apples adaptation to the city of Fairway, just because I can guarantee you we require a lot more permits and trips to Planning Commission than Shawnee does. We're one of 2 cities in Johnson County that requires any new home construction, any new build, to go before Planning Commission. So that is different than every other city in Johnson County barring one, and it's not a Planning Commission, it's an ARB. So that is, as I've been here, I've been here longer than you, just in a different role. If we hear anything from the residents about Fairway, it's maintain the quality, maintain the standard. And so that's what the Planning Commission, and when you look at the Planning Commission in particular, they are at the front line when it comes to that charge, because they are approving the new construction that comes into the city. The City Council gets to approve the business side of it as well, but when you look at residential redevelopment, that is the sole purview of the Planning Commission. Granted, the City Council grants the overall authority. So I think it makes sense the Planning Commission provided these ordinances. The council asked them to reconsider some things the Planning Commission has. I think it makes sense, as John Allen was stating, that it is appropriate tonight for the governing body to approve what we have here, and then allow the Planning Commission to take these further recommendations from the City Council regarding smart solar and have them evaluate whether or not they want to further adapt that into the code. Because at the end of the day, you can send it back now, and they could come back again and say, nope. So you could override them, but I think at this point, give them the opportunity to further review the programs that you're talking about, and then bring back a future consideration to the City Council.
Can I say
Chloe?
something? Thank you. Respectfully, Nathan, SoulSmart isn't just something out that I just sent to you. I did research, and to say that I wasn't or we're not educated enough to understand the process, I don't believe that. And I understand we're more restrictive, and I approve of that. But I also approve of we're aiding our citizens to be able to put something in their backyard that's not going to be offensive, that's green, that's going to be permeable. But I agree we do need something in place. But I also think that although I sent this to you and you sent it to Planning Commission, I just don't think it wasn't even spoke about, because it wasn't in the transcripts and it wasn't on the tape.
I sent the email just directly to all the planning commissioners.
That's what I'm talking about, because I watched the Planning Commission and I read the transcripts.
I was not aware you wanted it included in the packet that was posted on the website.
That is the normal process of receiving an email. It's just like when an email comes to the council.
Right.
We don't put it on the agenda.
Yeah.
So
I send those
they all
comments
received
directly
your email.
to the
Okay,
planning
so they all
commission.
got the link. Joe Allen, did you get the link for SoulSmart?
Yes.
Did you go and look at it?
Yes.
And what did you think?
I think it's something to continue to evaluate. Like I said, when we looked at all the neighboring cities' codes, at least that we looked at, none of which are requiring the SoulSmart at this time. So we wanted to be as open as we possibly could, so we weren't obstructive, and thought this was the best approach. And like I said, we've had over 6 months of discussion on this one, and felt like at this point it's in really good shape. But to Nathan's point, we do have some upcoming major code changes that'll be focused on primarily a lot of new green energy updates to the codes and things like that. So I imagine as the city council level, we'll probably be getting an updated solar energy code request here in the next year, would be my bet, for continued evolution of this.
One more thing. Thank you so much for letting me speak about this. It is a big concern to me, and it will be continued concern. And I understand we do need something in place so we can't run amok. We don't want anybody to run amok. But I do think it's worth revisiting. It's not going to change. It's going to get. The technology is changing and getting better, like anything that's high tech. It's always going to be changing and getting better. So hopefully they'll have smaller panels, so they're not going to be taking up half of somebody's yard, and you're going to be walking by going, oh my gosh, what's that? It's going to be something that's less intrusive. And I thank you very much for your work. I do appreciate it. I'm not dismissive. I'm very appreciative. Thank you.
Council, anything else? All right, I will open item D for public comment. Anyone in the audience wishing to address this? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, please.
Steve Platt, 5348 Chadwick. I like to make comments about stuff, and I'm really sorry I didn't know that this was being discussed, like Planning Commission and other things. So I'll make my comments here. I appreciate the fact that these ground systems, freestanding, need to be looked at and regulated. I think they're basically ugly. And I think one of the things that should be considered is that they need to be maintained, and if they're not working, they should be removed. That when these things happen, they should also be considered as a reduction of green space and water runoff issues that come with them. So that, we say that, we got permeable thing, but somebody puts just a rock garden underneath them. There's no sun that gets to the ground and grass doesn't grow. So, I think the freestanding side of this, I think what you guys are suggesting tonight is the right thing to do. Just put them to a halt. They need to have site plans, if you do consider them, and the size and the issues that surround the property are very much in place. I will make one other comment, that sometimes organizations present legislation or framework for legislation that sometimes promote an industry. So I think, John, you're absolutely right. You probably need to evaluate whatever SolSmart is and what it does. And thank God we're not asking about windmills today. So I'll just throw that out as kind of a smart thing. The other thing, too, that I think also with the solar that we need to probably throw into here is that the technology is going to be bringing in battery systems for backup battery. And there's probably a fire department issue with that. And I think this is also something that, as we incorporate this new technology and those types of things, we also have to look at the safety side of it from that point of view. So I just make those comments. I'm sorry I didn't make them before the Planning Commission. I hope that those comments get passed on. I hope you do the ordinance today and tweak it later on for.
They will be. I saw Kim taking notes over there.
Oh, good. Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Anyone else? I can say hi, neighbor. That's all right. We've been sitting a long time, Jim.
Well, the good news, Jim, is you didn't fall over and knock Bill out like Jerry did last meeting.
Well, I came close. But anyway, Jim Poplinger, 5300 Aberdeen. My first reaction to this is it's about time. I was talking about this when I was still on the council. And when this array that we've been talking about came up after it was already installed, and I've got to say the way in which it was handled kind of reminds me of something out of the movie Paint Your Wagon, where it came time to perform a marriage, but they didn't have any kind of provision for such, so they applied the law relating to mining claims. That's kind of the way this happened, I think. But anyway, it's about time we considered something relating to passive energy, and solar is a good place to start, but we really need to go further than that. Windmills was mentioned. There are wind turbines. There are all kinds of things of that nature that I think ought to be looked at. One thing that I was talking about when I was on the council was solar shingles. They're quite a bit different than what we think of in terms of solar panels. They look like a roof. But yet, is that one of our approved roofing materials? No. But this, what I was saying at the time and what I'll say now is this is what the Planning Commission really should be focused on, is looking at the materials, the new materials that are available, the new technologies that are available, especially those that relate to passive energy, and bring those into our code, not so much to say you can't do it or to regulate it as much as to make it available. Case in point, like I said, solar shingles, they're not permitted as a roofing material. You'd have to get an exception. And that's not the way it should be. We should be going out of our way to make those materials approved. And I hope we do that. Don't limit it to solar. Look at all the new technologies. And battery technology, that's another one that's changing rapidly. Now I'm drawing a blank. The batteries that, no, well, lithium, thank you. I know it well because I deal in them. Lithium ion have had a problem, and they're now coming up with technology that instead of being liquid in form, it's solid. It's less prone to fire, less prone to explosion. And we need to stay on top of those things. So, again, Kelly, I appreciate everything you said, and I think you're absolutely right. We need to take advantage of all the resources that are out there to get the best practices. But I go back to my original reaction, and that is it's about time we're addressing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Mayor?
Anyone else? I said thank you. Anyone else?
Mayor, Council, if I could just, I do want to address the comments regarding looking at the batteries and the solar shingles. Those were included in the discussion. Most of those battery backups to the solar system, you can mount them inside the garage. They're very thin profile. And in discussing that, even if they are mounted on the exterior, they're no more obtrusive than a central air unit out there. So we didn't feel like there was a need to address that. The solar shingles, he's right, that's not an approved roofing material, but you can request an exception, and it was discussed. So I want the council to know we did consider these other alternatives, and I'll piggyback on what Nathan said. Staff would like, we have tried to minimize some of the site plan reviews because we just don't have the staff. And when this got kicked down the road, this can got kicked down the road because when we're dealing with 5 and 6 new homes or addition remodels or exceptions to green space every month, there's not a lot of time to spend researching other things. So we're looking to minimize what has to go before planning so they can look at this sort of technology. So just wanted you to know we did look at it.
May I ask Kim a
Sure,
question?
Jenna.
2 questions. Well, one is for your list of all the things that you want to talk about next time with the Planning Commission, can you add this concept of solar-ready homes? I can send you a link. It's what Overland Park and Roland Park do. Friends on the council have shared that with me. And then it goes to kind of reduced permit fees, which are not the biggest thing, obviously, in the cost, but the idea is solar-ready homes, and I'll send you the information. And then, so I'm understanding what we're proposing today, which I think I'm okay with, everything would still need to go to the Planning Commission, even though...
Yes.
Yes. So, but you're open to, in the future, a system where perhaps folks wouldn't have to go to the Planning Commission to reduce kind of the burden on everyone.
Oh, I can address that. They have been begging us for that for some time. So that is, they are sincere.
Well, I didn't mean to challenge your sincerity.
No.
But I'm being, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. Good. Okay.
Okay, anyone else? No more public? Is Nathan, anybody raising their hands? All right, we will close that section of public comment, and I will ask for a motion concerning item D, ordinance number 1758.
I move to approve ordinance 1758.
David Watkins, Ward 3, second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we approve ordinance number 1758. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
no? No. All right, 7 yes, 1 no. What do you need, Kim? Okay. All right. Moving on to item E, consider building permit extension for Mac Colt Homes at 5823 Howe Drive. One correction to Basil's memo, the permit is being requested to be extended to March 15th of 2023. The memo read 22 and it should be 23. They're asking for an additional year.
I haven't caught up. That was me that did that.
That's okay. It doesn't matter.
I didn't think one day would be sufficient, given the fire damage.
Yeah, and this is due to we talked about it last month, I believe, a fire at that almost done, newly constructed home.
They were just painting the cabinetry, and their equipment malfunctioned and had an explosion. And essentially, the water damage from the firefighters and smoke caused more damage. But they literally have to take this thing down to the studs again.
Oh, it makes me sick. All right, council.
My only comment is I saw the video. I'm stunned that they only have to take it down to studs and they don't have to level it. So that is one positive, that they don't have to start from scratch, because there were flames out of every window from the video I saw.
It's very unfortunate.
Yeah. Council, any questions for staff? Any public comment? All right, we'll close that section of public comment, and I'll entertain a motion.
David Watkins, Ward 3, unless you want to move, Joe, since it's in your ward too. I move that we approve item E on the new business agenda to allow the requested building permit extension for Mac Colt Homes at 5823 Howe Drive.
Yes.
To March 15th of 2023. That's what I said requested.
Is there a second? All right, it's been moved and seconded that we do extend the building permit for 5823 Howe. All those in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, no. All right, that passes unanimously. Item F, consider agreement with Stantec for automated pavement condition assessment. Bill, are you still with us?
I'm trying. We do not have the agreement in front of council for consideration. We do have the scope. Rich and I was working on the language of that, sent it over to them for comment. They have not gotten back to us. That's why the memo says once the appropriate document is ready for signature. We did this last in 2015. It's a van. You can see it in the scope that has lasers on it that they can drive one way, drive the other way, completely scan the road, and then give a pavement condition index on it. It's what we will use as a roadmap to guide our future capital improvement plans moving forward. It takes the human element out of it. It really gives you a nuts and bolts look at the true shape of your street and road system. This is actually, we're getting a decent price on this because we're piggybacking on Overland Park's contract, but it's Westwood, Roland Park, and Fairway is all getting done at the same time. So there's a timing element to this as well. To give us this good a price, we budgeted $15,000 in the budget for this year, and we're getting it for $6,300. So
good job.
I feel like that's cheaper than what we paid for it in 2015.
It was only us in Roland Park that time. Yeah. We're getting 3 cities this time.
Bill, my recollection is we got a similar piggyback last time that several other cities were doing.
It was just us in Roland Park.
Is our thought going forward that we do it about every 5 years?
I'd like to do it every 3 years is what is recommended.
Thank you.
Bill, how many man-hours would we be doing it manually?
I can drive it. I mean, Fairway's not that big. I can drive it all in a day, but I mean, a good, solid look at it. I mean, you're talking a couple of weeks of me driving, getting out, looking at stuff.
That's taking you away from other things.
Yes, which I seem to keep getting more and more of those things, it seems like.
Right. And this is the system that kind of looks at the underlying, whatever you call it.
Yeah, it looks at all the cracking in the curb line.
Bedrock, not bedrock, but whatever the underlying subsurface condition is also, right?
It's not ground penetrating, no. It
No,
does.
oh, it's not. I thought it was. Oh, thank you for clarifying that.
But I can say from experience, if there's cracks on the top, there's cracks on the bottom usually.
Other questions?
Asphalt is very reflective when it cracks.
Other questions for Bill? All right, we'll open public comment for this item. Anyone wish to speak? Nope. Okay, we'll close that, and I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move that we approve item F on new business, that the agreement with the city and Stantec for the automatic payment condition assessment, subject to approval of city council on the final details.
Is that satisfactory, Bill?
By council, you mean attorney?
Yeah, you mean city, do you mean?
City attorney.
City attorney,
Yeah,
okay.
Rich, that guy over there.
Okay, I agree with that.
Well,
I
he's our legal counsel, sorry. I should have used a different term. Not the
Okay.
city council, the legal counsel.
The legal counsel, okay.
And yes, that.
Oh, okay, that I have no problem with, because we don't want to wait 30 days on this. Okay. Is there a second? All right, it's been moved and seconded that we approve this agreement with Stantec. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Passes unanimously. All right, moving on to governing body comment. Anyone on the governing body have a comment this evening?
Real quickly, on September 17th, Fairway is participating with all the Northeast Johnson County municipalities in a Go Green Environmental Fair. Mayor signed us up. She asked me to be our liaison. We're looking for volunteers to help with that. It's for-profit, nonprofit, governmental entity is going to come together. I think it's going to be at Sylvester Powell. We're still determining the details. Family friendly, just come and you can learn about different things to make your business, your home, your community more sustainable. So September 17th is a Saturday. September. So we have plenty of time, but maybe we'll put it on the Fairway calendar. I'll shoot it over to you guys. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Well, the mayor has two comments. I am passing to each council person a list that is in our new council person orientation guidelines. Excuse me. John Allen, you received a copy of this, so I'm not sending you another one. It's 52 tips for successful public service. I've reread them myself. I thought it was a good refresher, so I would ask that each of you take a look at it and consider each item. I think it will help in some of our discussions, and anyway, I recommend that. The other thing that I have is I'm asking all of the governing body people, myself included, we now have 2 scheduled meetings. One is City Council, second Monday of the month at 6:30 p.m. Please put it on your calendar out through the end of the year. Do the same for the combined admin finance committee meetings, committee of the whole, last Wednesday of the month, 6:30 p.m. Please put it on your calendar throughout the whole year. I'd like to see good attendance, please. Last Wednesday.
Mayor, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
And Nathan, I'm going to ask you this, I think. My whole day is just meeting after meeting after meeting. Is there a reason why the city couldn't actually send us meeting invites for these for the rest of the year, as opposed to us going in and manually? I'd appreciate that. That's me being lazy, though. I'll admit this.
Yeah. Mayor, I have to make a comment on this. It proves that somebody actually reads that magazine that comes out of the league.
Mm-hmm. I do. But I read everything.
I do too, once in a while.
I read it. Okay, that's all the governing body comments. We'll close that section, and now I'll open the floor for public comment on items not listed on the agenda. Do we have any? Anybody on Zoom? Okay, we'll close that, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. We are adjourned. Thank you all. Very productive meeting.